You're listening to No Podcast for Old Men.
Welcome to No Podcast for Old Men, the only podcast wherein three university professors provide philosophical analysis of each and every Coen Brothers film. Today is part 2 of No Country for Old Men, the Coen Brothers' 12th film. I am one of your co-hosts, Professor Robert Jones. I have with me my co-hosts over there in Louisville, Kentucky, part of the Union, not the Confederacy. Peter S. Fossil. Peter,
Colonel Peter S. Fossil to you.
How you doing over there in Kentucky?
Yeah, y'all were doing
there
great.
It's up, down there. You know, I think that Malcolm X said anywhere south of Canada is the South. Anyway, how you doing, man?
Good. Glad to be here. Nice to hear you.
Over there in Chico, California, Professor Troy A. Jolly. No, is that right, Troy? Troy A. Jolly.
Troy A.
How you doing, man?
Doing great. You can all speculate about what the A stands for, but yeah, doing fine. Good to see you guys again. Excited about continuing this discussion.
I think A stands for Apex Predator. Troy Gallimore.
Fucking A.
He carries around that captive bolt thing and everything.
He's our alpha.
So yeah, part 2. Are we excited to continue with our analysis and move into part 2 of No Country for Old Men?
Trey's excited.
Peter's excited.
Well, let's start part 2 of our analysis of our namesake, No Country for Old Men. What do you say we did cover a bunch of Coen Brothers themes, but there might be some Coen Brothers themes we haven't touched on that we should bring to light. Anyone want to jump in there on the Coen Brothers themes? What do you say?
Well, one thing I'd like to mention, I would test a little theory for you about this. I think of No Country as twinned with The Big Lebowski. And I'll tell you why. I mean, both of them have veterans and cowboys, and at least in No Country, some presence of the counterculture and business people with money. And they both involve struggles with nihilism. It's just that in The Big Lebowski, it's a comedy, and so nihilism is defeated. Here, it's not. It's kind of tragedy, and nihilism wins. And so in both, you see, sort of Reagan-esque, post-Reagan America, struggling with the nihilism that's taken over. And one path leads away from it, and one path leads into it. And so, I don't know, they both appear in my mind that way.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, super interesting. I think it's interesting because in just looking over what people are saying online and in literature, a lot of people like to pair this with Fargo because of the sheriff. There's a lot of, but I don't think I've ever seen.
That's a good pair.
Anyone point out the similarities between this.
Even Shigor says it wouldn't be fair. I was there all of a sudden. Of course, I popped up with like, it wouldn't be fair. It wasn't
the second
fair.
nihilist who references fairness.
That's right.
I mean, I think the Fargo No Country comparison or connection is obvious, and I think there's certainly something to it. To me, Fargo and Big Lebowski are also very closely connected, and it's part of that Coen Brothers thing where they do a film and then they do another film, the next one, which is just tonally and in every surface level way just the opposite,
right.
But about the same deep down themes, right? Just treating them in different ways. And, there's a lot of commonalities between Fargo and The Big Lebowski that you don't notice at first because they feel so different.
Right.
Maybe the most important one being that each of them has a really, really admirable, likable character at the center. And they're, of all the Coen Brothers films, to me, those are the two characters that stand out as human beings that you really love. Marge and the dude, they shine forth. And both of them are engaged in battles with nihilism and I think that then if there's a natural connection there, that it would make sense in a way to put The Big Lebowski along with No Country. I mean,
You
for
know,
me, Ed Tom is a very similar character to Marge in a
mm,
lot of ways. They're both grappling with a lot of the same things. Now, I think again for Ed Tom, it's more on the surface. He's
mm,
further on in his life and in his career, and so it's already out there. Marge is sort of on her way to having the kind of crisis maybe that
mhm.
he is having. And we see that an intimation of that in the very end of Fargo, you know. But she's got her confrontation with the true nihilist, and she's trying to understand
Right.
evil as he is, trying to make sense of it. They both have, you know, good but perhaps complicated marriages and so on. You know, they both have a kind of domesticity that they want to protect, and are wondering how that connects with their professional life. You know, and I've suggested, you know, in part one of this podcast that Ed Tom has this sort of classic Western good and evil view of the world and of his career as battling lawlessness, etc., and that there's something a little naive about that, and he wants to hang on to it. And I think we see some of that in Marge too. Certainly, that moment where Marge is confronting Jerry Lundegaard in his office and he flees and she's so shocked. You know, she just can't believe that somebody would run away. Really shows a certain kind of innocence or naivete. You know, he's fleeing the interview. Well, what do you expect from this guy? You know,
Right.
so there's these interesting, you know, interesting parallels, and yet at the same time, I think that, you know, we talked about the dark Marge hypothesis when we talked about
Hmm.
Fargo,
Hmm.
and I personally don't see a lot of darkness in Marge, but I do see a little bit of doubt, you know, and so on. I think the Coens maybe felt a little bit like it would be interesting to have a character who was like Marge in a lot of ways, but with more darkness, who was
Yeah.
like her in a similar position, similar doubts, feelings, etc., but who was imperfect and flawed in certain ways. And so, you know, Ed Tom is a version of that character. He's trying to do the same job. He's trying to keep the world safe. He's trying to make sense of things. He's doing all that stuff, but he's not necessarily good at it. And whereas with Marge, you have some hope at the end. You know, she's really good at her job and she might be able to do this stuff.
Yeah. She does seem
With
to
Ed
have
Tom,
this.
he kind of fails. You know, that he's defeated at the end of the film.
They both seem to be have been schooled or gotten some kind of education about darkness, and the evil that's out there. Oh, by the
Yeah.
way, I was thinking Big Lebowski and No Country both involved chasing a box full of money, a briefcase full of
Yes.
money.
And then at some point, the bag full of money is being thrown off a bridge. You know, there's definitely
Yeah.
some.
Hmm.
Some interesting things.
In all three films, cars are really important in connection with identity.
Oh
So
yeah,
that
yeah,
you know, the dude's car, of course, obviously closely connected to his identity. It absorbs a lot of the punishment. You know, instead of him
right.
absorbing it directly. In Fargo, they track down the bad guys because she recognizes their car. I mean, tons of car stuff in Fargo, obviously, but that's an important one.
Hmm.
In No Country, they track down Llewellyn Moss by running the number of his truck.
Right, right. Yeah.
Um, Moss and Sugar both change cars a lot so that they can't be traced and so on. So yeah, there's some interesting things going on with cars and identity in all these films.
And then with generations, I think in the Big Lebowski, we see that the older generation is kind of empty. There is a kind of real, whereas Fred Tom, he doesn't have that sense quite yet. And in the Big Lebowski, there's going to be a child born at the end, which gives hope. Whereas here, it seems like that scene with the kids and the 100 or the doll, at the car accident and the kids. It
Mm.
suggests that there's not really that much hope for the future.
It does not feel like a hopeful conclusion for sure. And you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and also now that I'm thinking about this, there's a lot here because in No Country for Old Men, again, I'm taking one of the big themes to be detachment or something like that.
Hmm.
Ed Tom again, and I keep coming back to this, but it seems to me to mean so much. Ed Tom at the beginning of the film talks about being part of the world, putting your soul at hazard.
Hmm.
He's thinking about retiring, quite literally withdrawing from the world, not being part of it to keep himself safe. But we sort of get the sense at the end, because again, it's a pessimistic film, that that's not really going to help. It's not going to solve his problems. You know, Ellis seems to have retired from the world and to have withdrawn to his own little, isolated place. Chigurh also has in his own way, and so does Moss as we watch it. In The Big Lebowski, there's also an idea of detachment, and here it seems to be almost recommended. You can get the idea, like how does the dude cope with things? Largely by withdrawing and detaching and living his own little life and not getting involved. And in fact, all of his problems begin when A, people break into his house and sort of force him to become involved in things, and B, when Walter says, go after, get justice, pursue justice, don't just let it be. And the dude says at a certain point in the film, if I hadn't listened to you and I just let this go, I could just be at home with pee stains on my rug, right? None of this awful stuff would have happened. So the dude's key, I mean, there's a lot of debate, obviously, a lot of room for disagreement about, is the dude a happy person? And if so, what's the key to his happiness? I think he seems like a pretty happy person. He seems like a pretty admirable role model in a lot of ways. And it's plausible to think at least a large part of it is a certain kind of detachment, a sort of a Zen-like attitude or something of not getting wrapped up in little day-to-day things because they'll drive you crazy, and not worrying about the pursuit of money, right? Losing a big bag of money and saying, yeah, things happen, whatever, had a little thing happen, lost some cash, right? His equanimity and his ability to detach from things, it seems like it's really serving him well. So it'd be really interesting if to think about No Country for Old Men as bringing this up again and reconsidering it and saying, but maybe in the world as it is, you can't actually do this, or it doesn't work, or there's a lot to be said against it that we didn't consider earlier on.
Nice. Nice, yeah.
Very cool. Very good.
I love the connection. Yeah, I hadn't thought about the two films together much at all.
See?
Now that I'm thinking,
Great connections.
Yeah.
I wanted to say something about the tone of the film. Troy, you mentioned the tone. And for my money, of all the Coen brothers films, this is our 12th film. I think the two films that are most similar in tone are Blood Simple and No Country for Old Men. And I say that because a lot of the films are dark, but even the ones that are dark are stylized in a certain way. And I think, to me, No Country for Old Men is like the Coen brothers with all of their expertise and honed skills. It's like the mature Coen brothers Blood Simple in the way that it's not stylized. I mean, there's minor stuff, but it's not stylized. Of course, it takes place in Texas, and you mentioned the voiceover. Both films involve Texas as a kind of character, particularly in No Country for Old Men. But I do think the tone. It wasn't until No Country where I thought, oh, the Coen brothers are returning to this. I want to say a kind of, for the Coen brothers, it's a kind of realism. There's not much irony. There's not much stylization. It's stark.
I think in a lot of respects, including, tone and so on, and certainly setting, like you said, again, in Texas in the early 80s, both of them, I think there are a lot of similarities. Yeah, if you had to pick two that were most similar, those might be the two. I do think that they've grown philosophically a lot since Blood Simple, and so No Country is much better and more interesting, partly for that reason. That, again, in terms of narrative, Blood Simple is a very nice, tightly connected narrative. It's got closure at the end. It kind of all wraps up. There's no real loose ends and so on. No Country is all loose ends in a sense, and the plot seems tight for a while, or fairly tight, and then it just sort of explodes and it almost falls apart. And again, that is not a criticism. It's part of what makes this film brilliant, that things they set up for a kind of a narrative climax and resolution that you're expecting, and then say, but in real life, that's not how things work. And it goes in all these weird different directions, and people get killed in weird ways, or don't get killed at all, but they get injured, like Sugar in the car accident, or Ed Tom just sort of gets to the end and just sort of stops trying, says, yeah, I'm done. I've given up. I'm too old. And that's sort of the end of his story. So I think philosophically, it's so much more interesting. But I agree, yeah, that in a lot of ways, they're quite similar.
I think there's been a kind of growth. I agree with you about that, but between the two, in the sense that you'll be able to correct me on this, but in Blood Simple, it seemed like the evil was clear on the surface, in the sense that every one of the characters had a darkness about them, and you kind of rooted for the lovers, but I mean, like burying the guy out in the field and all of that, and and then there's questions about infidelity, and I think, but here, the darkness of the main characters. At first, you're rooting for Llewellyn and Carla in a way, but by the end of it, things are more complicated. So I felt like there was a slow exposure that happened in No Country that showed their growth as filmmakers and writers, whereas Blood Simple seemed more straightforward in terms of how it all functioned and where the darkness was in that.
Yeah, I think Blood Simple is like, how do we make a really good genre film with limited resources, which they had. And No Country is an example of what they're doing, that they've done many times since, which is let's think about genre and think about the assumptions of genre and what those express. And then how can we sort of fuck with those and undermine them and explore and wake people up and, say, wait a minute, we always assume this at movies, but should we think that? So yeah, there's that interesting extra layer, much deeper, more exploratory in that way. I think that's right.
I think
The Blood Simple was like their ticket into the filmmaking world, but this is like the masterpiece.
definitely. I said to Troy last night, I texted him, I said, it's a masterpiece.
Well, it's a perfect film, right? Like, what would you change about? What scene would you take out? What scene would you add? What line of dialogue? There's nothing to change about this film. It couldn't.
That's always a good question. To me, it
Yeah.
would have been the Norteño band, but I think I've grown.
No,
I've
see, like
made
I
some
said, I
peace
even
with
like
it.
that.
I think
I
I've made
like what
peace
they do
it.
with that. It's a great
Yeah.
it's a very unexpected moment, the weird transition to that, and then it
Yeah.
falls apart immediately. Like,
Yeah.
oh, look, it's cliched Mexico. Oh, no, it's not going to go that way after all. This is the real world. This guy's lying there bleeding in front of them.
I'll try to defend it. Although I accept the critique as it's cultural stereotype. But I could imagine in these border towns, like if you've ever walked over the border from San Diego into Tijuana, which I've done, in these border towns, it's not, and I mean, of course he's bleeding, but he's got a jacket, he's got like a beer. So it's not uncommon to have people who've been partying because you can just party all night, at least in Tijuana. So if there's a guy who's drunk off his ass, lying, crashed out, he might be a way to get a tip or something, right? So it's not like they approach him and go, "There's a guy there's an American who is bleeding to death." It's more of like, "Oh, there's someone who's been partying all night, and maybe he'll tip us." So that's how I took it.
Okay.
I buy it along those lines. I also want to say, and we haven't talked about the music yet. We will, but of course there is almost no music in this film. And one of the things that
Yes.
sets that very short scene apart is not just the visual presentation, the weirdness and unexpectedness of the visual, but also the music. Suddenly, he's left the country and everything's due. Suddenly, there's this loud music going on. It's sort of startling in
Yeah,
that
and
way.
the music, the lyrics do they do
You
fit
mentioned
into
that earlier, yeah.
they fit. So
The Icarus thing, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for it. I have no problem with it, but who knows?
Sticking on Coen Brothers themes for a moment, and we've talked about this already, but just to reiterate it is like I mean, the Coens, if they never miss an opportunity to present us with the sort of this kind of stark possibility of nihilism. So, and we're going to see this in the films following. I'm thinking in Buster Scruggs, we're going to see stuff in A Serious Man. But again, we get this question, and the Coens love to hold up a mirror to us, right? And to say, all this shit that we've been, I mean, there's a cinematic aspect in which they're saying all these movies that, where they follow a plot and then there's something, there's some desire to be met and then it's met and there's a denouement, all that. They say, fuck you. And so again, they not only cinematically do we get a kind of subversion or perhaps a nihilism, if you will, but they hold the mirror up and say, what if there's no meaning to anything? What if there is no value? And I think they do it very starkly in No Country for Old Men. It's of all the, I'm trying to think of a more nihilistic film that the Coens, I mean, it's certainly bleak.
No, you're right. You're right. And
Is there a bleaker Coen Brothers film or a more nihilistic Coen Brothers film? Maybe Blood Simple's pretty bleak too.
maybe Blood Simple. Yeah.
No, but Abby does sort of triumph in the end. I mean, and she's not a
that's
bad.
true.
The rest of them all have their darkness, but I'm not sure Abby has a lot of
Yeah.
darkness.
Yeah.
That does feel a little
She
bit at
was
least
an
like.
adulteress, so
Oh,
She's the adulteress. But, well,
let's not get judgmental here.
there's a contrast with the Raising Arizona too, in the sense that there's a couple being chased by nihilism who have stolen something, and in their case a baby, but here it's a box of money, but they're both being pursued by this almost supernatural, being the Dark Rider, the Apocalypse, and Rising Arizona. They both take place in deserts too, don't they? So I think, but there's a kind of, I mean, what resolves it? I mean, the Dark Rider is defeated, and they give back the stolen goods, and who knows what, but none of that happens here. But there is a kind of structural similarity in that, I
And they
think.
both end with dreams.
They both
In
end with
Raising
dreams.
Arizona, they
That's
see
right.
the dream. We
Yeah.
see the dream, and this one they make the very interesting choice of not showing us any part of the dream or anything, but just sticking with Tommy Lee Jones's face as he describes his dreams.
Yeah.
So there's a sense in which this ends with a dream sequence, but not the ordinary kind. And dream sequences we've talked about, something the Coen brothers like, and
Yeah.
seen them in Big Lebowski, and what else have
Absolutely.
we seen? Man Who Wasn't There. There's something that looks like a dream sequence, but this one reminds me both of most of Raising Arizona, because that
Yeah.
actually ends with. So
Yeah.
both films end with somebody describing, or essentially, and
Yeah.
actually in Raising Arizona we see his dream, but he also does describe
Describe it.
to us
Yeah.
as well. He narrates it. Yeah.
Mhm.
I
And
said when we
it's,
talked about Raising Arizona, that seemed like a really interesting way for the Coens to have their cake and eat it too, in terms of giving us a happy ending, because of course it
right.
is a very happy ending, except it doesn't really happen. It's just what he's dreaming about.
Yeah.
In this one, it's playing a very different sort of function. I mean, are these happy dreams? They seem very, very sad in a way. The first one, he loses money,
Yeah.
The second one is happy in the sense it's his father and he's going ahead to make a place for him. He's carrying fire and so on. But
Right.
the pervasive feeling for me is a sense of loss and
Right.
sadness.
Right.
He's out there in the dark, and it's not real anyway. The last line of the film is, "And then I woke up," which is so profoundly ambiguous,
It's
because
so ambiguous.
waking up, of course, can be a good thing, right? I woke up to reality. I mean, this
Mm.
Ed Tom begins suffering from certain delusions, not seeing things correctly, and in the end, he woke up. But if the reality you're waking up to is terrifying, that's not necessarily a good thing. And if you're having a sort of a comforting dream about your father, and then you wake up and you realize my father died long ago, there's nobody out there to carry the fire for me, there's nobody out there to keep me safe, waking up is not a very happy thing.
Both the Raising Arizona dream and these are about family. In
Mhm.
both cases, you end with family, which can be, and even Big Lebowski in a sense too. But family is something resistant to nihilism, but it looks a lot less. Looks a lot more vulnerable anyway at the end. I mean, on the one hand,
Yeah.
there is the hope of the father being ahead, maybe even in the afterlife, but there's the life with Loretta that's there, but it looks kind of it looks less hopeful. They don't have children, do they? I don't think they have children.
We
do
don't get a sense that they do, or
Yeah.
it's never mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is another way in which the end of this reminds me of the end of Fargo too, where you have Marge lying in bed next to her husband, and on some level, I feel like, and she's bringing a child into the world, and I feel like she's filled with doubts and thinking, well, is this enough? Is this domestic space safe? Can I keep it safe? Is this really, with all the darkness and cold out there, can we really maintain this? Given what she's seen, given what she's heard about, people breaking into homes, kidnapping people, and so on, and all that, can we
How would you?
really,
I'm
can we
sorry.
really be safe? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. How would you compare that other Tom, the Tom of Miller's Crossing, to Ed Tom's at the end? Because Tom, what's his last name in Miller's Crossing? I forget.
Tom Regan, isn't it?
Reagan, that's right. At the end, he seems to be kind of contemplating too, his existence. What do you think about how those compare?
Again, boy, that's so
Yeah.
interesting. I hadn't thought about it directly, comparing them.
I
Reagan
mean,
at the
Leo
end,
and what's her name? They're gone. They're
yeah,
going. And
everybody, Tom Regan at the end of Miller's Crossing is just the outsider, right? He has
mhm,
no place. He
yeah,
begins the film with a community, with a home, a job, a place, where he belongs, and by the end of it, he is just alone in the world.
yeah.
So
That's
thinking
pretty
about,
bleak, also.
it's very bleak. I think that's a very, very bleak ending, and he's brought himself to this by the way he approaches life and doing what he has to. It wasn't inflicted on him exactly, right? He's done what he thought he had to
Yeah,
do. What was right.
he's got his
So
hat.
he's got his hat. That's all he's got, right. And yeah, I
I
think
think he's got a kind of bleak position at the end there too. But
if
it
No
doesn't
Country is
seem.
a film about belonging and detachment and so on, then there's some real strong similarities. Again, this is
Yeah,
sort of the direction that Moss is going in for a lot of the film, and of course, rather than ending up there, he ends up dead. But that's the only kind of thing that keeps him
right,
from ending up there. It's more or less where Chigurh is and has been for most of his life, as far as we know. And in a
right.
way, it's where Ed Tom ends. I
Yeah,
mean, all these three characters, they don't intersect. They don't really meet each other hardly at all, partly because
yeah.
their existences are so solitary. There's a sense in which they don't really intersect with anybody.
you know what you don't see. I guess you kind of see it with Ed Tom, but I mean Lebowski. What's in a way what's the protector or the insulator from nihilism and other things there is the group of friends, the triad of friends, and
Yeah.
you know that Tom Regan had that too, but he's lost that. But the dude maintains his friendship. He's got still Walter with Tom's by himself. Ed Tom Bell, he seems sort of friendless too. I mean, Ellis is a relative. The you know Wendell and that's a deputy. Yeah, he doesn't have that circle of friends.
He doesn't seem to.
Yeah.
You know, the Coens make a lot of films about really solitary men. And
Mhm.
especially when you're thinking about the ending of the film, you know, A Serious Man, we'll certainly see it there. Inside Llewyn Davis will be another one.
Yeah.
Tom Regan and Miller's Crossing, Barton Fink, of course, at the end of Barton Fink sitting alone
Yeah.
on the beach. He tried to make a friend with John
That's
Goodman.
right.
You know, that did not go well. So
You saw that went right.
when these guys reach out, The Big Lebowski is such an exception in so many ways. You know,
It
you,
really
you
is.
actually have a
Yeah.
male lead who at the end is not alone and is not scared, or, you know,
Right.
he goes back to his friend group, like you said.
He
His
raises
bowling
his
alley where he
beer.
belongs. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's happy, man.
He's happy.
He's doing okay. Like, it's a real outlier in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Want to move into a little discussion of the music and the soundtrack.
Okay. We already talked
Yeah.
about the
Talked a little bit about
Tenua Band,
The
ticking of the clock.
and Troy, you did mention that there's very little music in
Yeah, I was
this.
going to buy the soundtrack album, and it turned out I couldn't find it anywhere.
No,
Yeah.
but there
There
is.
is a tiny bit. There's a little incidental music here
And
and
that's
there, but even
surprising
that
in
is
so many ways. I
so
mean,
simple.
it's so like
It's all
Cormac
the
McCarthy.
music throughout the film is. It's almost like it's. I characterize it more as sound design than I
Yeah.
do. You know
It it certainly is not music like a record that you would put on and listen to. It's just like
except for the
often like a sort of
final.
a single chord or
Yeah,
tone or something like
except for
that.
the credits. There's
Yeah.
and the tune that we have to mention Carter Burwell again is the composer, and the final tune is beautiful
Yeah.
and kind of eerie, and it's a beautiful melancholy ear, and there's a weird stringed instrument that's sounds like a deeply down-tuned guitar or bouzouki, some kind of instrument I haven't looked into, but um, it's definitely I think it's the perfect music for the end of that film.
I wonder if at any point they considered, because the film is so lacking, and not lacking us, but you know, there's so little music in it, again, almost nothing. If they ever considered not even having music at that point and just sort of letting the credits roll in silence, because I could see them in a way wanting to do that to really emphasize the
Oh yeah, that would have been
emptiness.
good.
Well, you know, I mean, I really like the Carter Burwell piece. They had this
Yeah.
piece of music, they wanted to use it. I get it. So,
I think
but
they would have
I
left
agree
the
with Robert,
clock
it
ticking.
fits. The clock ticking, that is
That would have been
so.
great during the credits. Just
I
clock
mean,
ticking.
I feel like there's had to be some part of them that at least considered that, you know. So
Yeah.
let's just now let it roll in the darkness, let them sit there in the quiet, let them think about what
Yeah.
they just saw. But it's not the way they went, and you know, but certainly throughout the film, it has a big impact. The
It
fact
does.
that there's, I mean, really makes you conscious of what music does in other films and how much
Right.
it sort of conditions your responses and
Yeah.
transitions you from one scene to the next and all that. When you don't get that, one of the things that happens, of course, is you kind of have to decide for yourself how to react to things. Because like there's no music saying, oh, this is happy or this is bad or you should be scared now, right? Or anything like that. And maybe along those lines, we should just say that you have to be killer filmmakers to pull this off. Because if
Yeah.
you want to make
I do.
a movie that's full of fear and suspense and so on, and you're not falling back on the music to evoke those emotions, boy, you have to be good. Like, how did they do that?
Well, I think
Very
it
few
even plays
filmmakers could manage it.
into the setting. I mean, I think you can think of like it's true you don't the first character you meet is Shigor and the deputy, but really the first character is the landscape, and what it to me it like contrasts with is a sort of John Ford kind of spectacular, grand,
Right.
sublime,
Da, 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 da,
sweeping.
da, 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 right.
Exactly, and
Yes,
with it would be
the big
music that would go
orchestra.
like that too, and the absence of either of those things, the sublimate. I mean, it's sublime in the sense that it's
Yeah.
kind of horrifying sublime in this film, but it does, but taking out the music, to me, intensified that. Whereas when you fill it with like a rich orchestral kind of score in a place like that, it would sap out the nihilism of that landscape that the absence of music gives you, I think. you might say about like Shigure too. Like he's someone without a sense of humor, which is maybe yeah. Um, but also I can't imagine him like enjoying music. What would he listen?
Right.
I
Right.
mean,
He's not going to, pull out a Fleetwood Mac record and sit there and just have a good time, Like, no, you can't imagine him doing any of the things that ordinary people take pleasure in, right? He
yeah.
doesn't
He
seem
might,
like,
if he wants to torture one of his victims, he might put on a Fleetwood Mac album. No, but I wanted to say that there is
Rubber
there's
Soul.
let's make a distinction. There isn't a lot of music. One of the things there is, as I mentioned, to me, it's more of like sound design. The
Mhm.
scene where he goes into the clerk. I read somewhere where Carter Burwell, there's a tone that increases in loudness as
Mhm.
they get to the climax where he calls the coin flip. And he put that tone at 60 cycles, 60 hertz, which is the same as your refrigerator, like the outlets run on. So he put that in there as it's kind of like an unconscious something that makes you uneasy, right? As
Right.
opposed to,
Right.
more of a Hitchcock thing. But
I think also the scene where he shoots at the bird, right?
when
There's
he shoots at
something
the
like that
bird,
in the background. Yeah.
there is some, so it is that sound design. But what I wanted to point out was there's almost a diegetic music in the sense that they really emphasize the environmental sounds. There's a
Yep.
lot in the film, the soundscape, if you will, the wind and the things, flapping, the sign spinning at the gas station. And so they allow that diegetic sounds to create this atmosphere of tension that in some ways I think is even more powerful than having music telling us this is where you need to get scared. It's like there's a certain kind of longing in the film, the sound of, and even when when he comes to the hotel, which we'll talk about, when he goes to the motel, there's a little bit of sound design, but there's also just the ambient sound of being in a parking lot at night, which itself it can be scary, right?
Hmm.
If there's no sound and it's dark and you're looking around and where did I park my car? So
And
anyway,
like on a strip mall with the impersonal, sound of traffic behind you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think they do a master. If it's the Coens or if it's Carter Burwell or a combination, they do a masterful job of using the sort of the sounds other than musical sounds to create a really
I,
intense atmosphere.
I agree. The wind sometimes is really loud. I think that, for instance, when he goes to visit Ellis, I remember the wind outside having a real strong sense of
Mhm.
this very
Oh yeah,
isolated
that's right.
place that, and in combination with this, we should probably also point out that, especially for the first third or so of the film, maybe even more, there's very little dialogue a lot of the time.
Yeah.
There's the opening voiceover, then the stuff with Sugar killing the deputy, and all. The deputy talks on the phone, but that's quite brief.
Mm,
He kills him, he goes and kills the guy on the road. There's only a few words through that.
yeah.
Then you get the long hunting sequence with Llewellyn and Moss, and he says almost nothing. There's a couple times he talks to himself. He says, "Hold still" to the
Yeah.
antelope. And then once or twice he's musing to himself and thinking, and so he kind of thinks his thoughts out loud, just mostly, I think, so we can know what he's thinking. But
Yeah.
most of that is silence.
And then all
We
the times when they're just repairing themselves after the woundings, and
Right,
that's a
the
long time.
surgery, or the
Surgery.
Sugar's self-surgery, or the long sequences where Moss is in the motel room and he's putting the bag of money into the air vent and so on. There's no talking there. The
Yeah.
the,
But
the ratio, if you counted up, the ratio of number of dialogue words to the length of the movie, it would be a very low ratio.
Yeah.
and Troy,
Yeah.
that scene you just brought up, it's so eerie. The sound of the air. It kind of
In the
reminded me
vent,
of, what
yeah.
it reminded me of in Barton
Mm,
Fink whenever he opened his door,
Yeah.
that
mm,
suction kind of a sound that
That's a great
definitely.
Coen Brothers connection, dude. The going into the walls in Barton Fink and into the drain and so on, and the air vents in this one.
yeah,
I hadn't thought of
really
that. That's
eerie.
nice.
So
Yeah.
just a quick correction. They're
Mm.
not antelope. They're actually American pronghorn, if they're called.
Oh,
Thank
People
you.
people
well
call
done.
them. They're
People
Well
call them
done.
antelope. I got
they're
my
not
fake news
antelope.
off the web somewhere, but not okay. Good.
I
Pronghorn.
did
I
love
thought
the
in the novel McCarthy might have referred to them as antelope. I don't know, but in the film,
well,
obviously something else. Good to know.
Uh,
as
Um,
corny as it was, I did love how he used the sky in those situations too. I mean, the big cloud that's coming in on the
Oh yeah.
foghorn, and then when he's being chased by the cartels at night, the lightning in the background, that was really
That's
great.
the visuals in this film
Yeah.
are stunning. We haven't
Yeah.
even mentioned that perhaps, but what a beautiful film to look at. Oh my God. And
It-
to see on a big screen, if you ever get the chance again, if anyone shows
yeah.
it anywhere, go see it, travel
Well,
to see it. Because
and you mentioned the shooting of the Raven. The sound of that was just
Mhm.
striking to me. But also, I mean, that's like a connection back to Lady Killers, right? Because it's the bird at the end
Yes.
that
Mhm.
kills him. Because in the book, he does shoot at a bird in the book, but it's like a pigeon. It's a brown white kind of thing. They intentionally chose a raven, and I couldn't help thinking like again, it's sort of beating over the head. Was like, Raven, if you think you're badass as you were like in Lady Killers, you've just met somebody who's worse.
Well, Peter, I think you might be forgetting that they filmed this during the Hollywood pigeon strike, so they had to go with something else.
That's it.
That's
That's
right.
it. And it might have also
Oh,
been soot on it. Did you? Because I don't know if you read that story about Paul Thomas Anderson was filming There Will Be Blood nearby, and they actually
yes.
had to stop production
Yeah.
at one point because of the
He
smoke
he
from
burned
the.
the oil derrick, right? And
Yes,
yeah, they were
that's right.
filming so close. That's right. That yeah, they had to halt their production. I remember that. I I was also gonna say connection with the sound stuff, the lack of dialogue, and so on. I didn't look this up. I can't remember now, but it seems to me that it was around this time they were really interested. The Coen brothers were really interested in doing a different adaptation, which was of that James Dickey novel called To the
Oh,
White
right.
Sea. Remember
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I did.
And part of the idea of To the White Sea, it's this guy who's like a pilot, I think, who's shot down, stranded, in Siberia or something. It would have been a movie almost entirely without dialogue. They might even have been considering trying to do it with literally no dialogue. And that's part of
Mm,
what really excited them about it. And they really wanted to do that film. They couldn't get the money for it. Everybody thought that's commercial suicide, a film without dialogue.
right.
So they never made it. But
Mm,
some of that approach, I think, they were thinking about that. And I
yeah.
think that really influenced a lot of their choices about
Interesting.
how to
Well,
film this
didn't
one.
Robert Redford made a thing about a life. He was on a lifeboat.
Oh, All is Lost. Yes, that have you seen that? That's a
Yeah,
great
yeah,
film.
it was
Yeah,
great. And I
that is a
don't
wonderful
remember
film.
much dialogue in that film.
No, there's very little. That's right. There's almost there. I think there's some, but very, very little. Yeah, that's right. Robert Redford starred. I forget the VC Chandor or something like that was the director.
Mm,
Anyway, that's a really great film. If anybody hasn't seen it, check that out. I love that film.
Well,
mm,
I think this is a good time to pivot to cinematic plot character observations. We've already
Mm.
kind of gotten into those, some of them. And let me see. I had some. If you want me to, since I had this thing in front of me, I've been wanting to make sure I don't forget. Before we get into the details of these observations and plot and other cinematic connections, but I wanted to talk with you guys about the casting. I
Mm.
think the casting is brilliant. I think, first of all, to me, I mean, of course, Javier Bardem plays an unforgettable villain. I mean, one of the great cinematic villains of all time. But I want to, my money, an acting tour de force for me is Tommy Lee Jones. He's in some ways, he's like a Buster Keaton. His face emotes. And there's a few actors, I think, Anthony Hopkins, he's another one to me that just with certain facial expressions can emote. And I think Tommy Lee Jones in this film is I don't, did he win an award for this? He should have won an award for this because
He should have.
the casting is brilliant. He to me it's an acting tour de force by Tommy Lee Jones. He emotes and expresses so much with just his face and the way that when I was reading the book, when I read the Sheriff Bell part, I couldn't get Tommy Lee Jones's voice, his drawl. Oh,
Totally.
it just that's who he embodies Bell so amazingly.
Yeah.
And so I thought the casting is brilliant. Of course, there's a long story about
He's from out there. He's from the
that's where
town
he's
that
from.
Llewellyn Moss is from.
And he
That
also had
really,
Yeah.
he
that makes
and he
sense because he
So,
feels so authentic.
yeah.
and he also apparently Tommy Lee Jones doesn't talk about his relationship with his father. So maybe there
Oh,
Mm.
was stuff there that was
Wow.
he
I
was
think he did
calling
win
on
the Oscar. I think both, and Javier Bardem won the Oscar for Best Supporting too.
supporting actor. There's a story where Josh Brolin really wanted the role badly, and so he was shooting a film with Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino, the Grindhouse, and so he asked them if they would help him film an audition reel, and supposedly it's known as like the highest production audition tape ever produced. I haven't seen it, but apparently it's
Yeah, it was kind of a breakthrough for him, Brolin. I mean, he'd been
yeah,
a child actor, but I think this really raised his profile in the film world.
I
I
agree.
think that Heath Ledger read for that
He
role.
did, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But
And also the deputy ended up playing Wendell. I think he read for it too.
that's true. He really wanted it.
Yeah.
I think it's called like the Rodriguez film is called like Planet Terror or something like that. You know what I'm talking about?
Okay. No.
Anyway, so we start out and Moss's life takes a turn for the worse once he sees the black dog, of course. So the black dog is this kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
sinister,
That's great. Yeah.
in folklore, it's like the
More shadow.
Hound of the Baskervilles kind of a
Yeah.
thing. So I don't think that that's an accident that he sees
No.
the black dog. The other thing I was
And
saying,
can we just say the dog chase was so awesome? I
oh,
love
that piece of just that's if you just took that scene
Damn.
and produced that as a 7-minute short, okay,
That was so
Yeah,
great.
that whole sequence is unbelievable.
That
Oh my
was
God.
awesome. Frankly, I would have stayed in the water. I don't think, if I could fight a dog like that, I'd fight it in the water.
Well, but that dog could swim too. It's going to get you in the water.
No, but I
Peter.
mean, once it gets to you, I don't know.
You think you have more of a chance in the water?
do,
I don't
you
know.
do.
I don't know. That thing was it was a killing machine,
Maybe.
like Sugar. But I think in what's interesting is in the book there is no dog. He just gets
Yeah.
he just
Yeah.
floats swims down the river.
Yeah.
Let's see. I always wondered, and I couldn't remember from the book. And when I read it, I read it closely. Actually, I was like, here's a question I always had. The film starts with Shigor handcuffed by this kind of, I guess, lackey deputy. I always thought, like, how does Anton Chigurh get arrested and handcuffed? Like, what the fuck is? And then when I read the book,
Voluntarily. Yeah.
he did it as an experiment because he thought, I bet you I can get out of this, using this technique to get out of handcuffs. So it was all
That's right.
the
It was
whole
all-
thing was just Chigurh just doing a little,
Yeah.
just trying it out, see how it worked.
Well,
So
he's so methodical, and the way he goes into like the motel rooms, and he's planning his entrance. He practices his entrance, into the cartel. He's so
He checks to
Measuring
see
the-
how thick the wall is
measuring
to
the
see if a
wall,
bullet
yeah.
will go through it. right?
exactly.
That
Where's
guy's a
everything laid out?
professional. Whatever you say about Chigurh, not a nice guy, but man, he's a professional.
Yeah.
The other things,
Shoes.
I have a few more things I wanted to mention. One is another film that came to mind in this film when I'm watching this film was the 1962 Kirk Douglas. It's Lonely Are the Brave. I know that Troy and I have talked about that before.
Yeah, great
The
film.
notion of the cowboy who's out of time, or his time has passed. So there is, and that's if you haven't seen that film,
Oh, that's a
highly
good
recommend it.
connection.
Love
Yeah.
that film. Lonely Are the Brave, Kirk Douglas. And another question I always had is what's with that scene where Chigurh, and I know it's in the novel, like he shoots at the bird and he misses, but the bird flies away. And I was reading some stuff about that, and some people were saying that they changed it to a bird of prey because he's a predator and he's.
What? That was a raven or something. No,
Oh man, when I watched it, I thought it was like a hawk of some
I
kind.
might be wrong. Yeah, I thought it was a raven.
But anyway, some people have maybe they're wrong, but they were saying it was something like a hawk, bird of prey type of thing. And the claim was that he's well, first of all, there's a couple of things. One is there's this kind of trope called like the kick the dog trope, which is I read about. I think there's a whole page. I don't know if it's a wiki page, but the kick the dog trope. It's like the save the cat trope, Troy, and that is the villain will harm an animal, and so you hate him even more. He'll attempt.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And I think they made reference to the Searchers, where I think one of the Indian guys who's probably, I don't know if he's played by a Native American, but in the film, one of the Indians like intentionally harms it, kicks a dog or something. And you're supposed to. So some people are saying, well, Chigurh is such a jerk that he just randomly will try to kill a
Yeah,
bird.
because seeing him kill that deputy and then the guy on the roof, that wasn't enough. I was still making up my mind about him, but man, when he shot at that bird.
But I think the real what's happening is it's kind of a foreshadowing of his shootout with Moss. But I
Did you
thought it was
catch, by
interesting.
the way, the Mike Zoss pharmacy thing?
Yes, Mike Zoss. Yeah.
That's their production company
That's funny.
of Coen Brothers.
I thought that when he's driving down the street and he gets in the accident, he's coming up on a green light.
Mhm.
So he's following the rules. And what I want to say, when he gets out of the car, I wish that kid would have said, if the rules you followed got you to this intersection, what good are those rules?
Exactly.
Because notice he doesn't go through a red light. He's following the rules, right?
Yeah. No, the other guy had to run the light. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
The other driver, who of course we never see, we don't know anything about.
That was another exactly. That was a thing of restraint there, Troy, that you were talking about before. Because in the book, the other driver is literally catapulted out of the car.
right.
The windshield is on one of them. There's couple of kids. They're kids, and one ends up on the hood of the car. The other ends up on the porch of the house across the
porch.
street.
My God.
and there's a woman
wow.
out there.
There's a
She
woman
starts
out there.
screaming.
Wow.
And I thought they could have done that because, like in Miller's Crossing, with the stupid, machine gun dance thing. I mean, they could do shit like that, but they didn't. They held back on that.
They're maturing as filmmakers.
Yeah, there you go.
I did want to make a connection. It's sort of a Coen theme, but also in Fargo, we talked about how the criminals, they always had the TV on. I thought it was interesting that when Sugar's in the hotel and he's doing self-surgery, he has the
Turns it
TV
off.
he has the TV running.
Hmm.
He has the TV. I'm like,
Well, I thought you were going to say, because in the book he has it continuously running, but then when he comes out of the bathroom, he turns it off, and I thought,
right,
that was,
but I think it's interesting that he even has it on. What does
Yeah, it
Anton
is.
Chigurh watch on television?
yeah,
What are his favorite shows? I just found it fascinating, and I
Yeah.
thought,
Well, we know that in Fargo, Peter Stormare watches soap operas, so
watches
maybe
soap
this is a common thing to psychopaths. I don't
maybe.
know.
the other thing I wanted to do with you guys is we've talked about the dream, and there's a lot of stuff online about the dream analysis, but I wanted to take a minute and hear what you guys had to say. There's two dreams. The first one, he has a dream. He meets his dad. He gives him money, and he meets him in town. His father gives him money. He loses it. Second dream is the story about he's going through some mountain pass at night. The father is younger than he is now, and he has the horn filled with the flame, and then anyway, I mean, I could talk more about it, but I'm interested. What's your analysis? What are you two guys' analysis of the dream? Because a lot of people, it's a big discussion point online. What does the dream mean? What is it? I'm curious what you two guys think.
I'll go first, but I don't have a lot to say about it in a way. I mean, it's very interesting to me, but I mean, the first one seems pretty straightforward, although maybe there's more meanings lurking if we delve. But certainly, this idea of his father giving him money, which he then loses, we know who Ed Tom is. He's worried about his own legacy, about his own standing as a man, his abilities in his job, and so on. Feels like in some way, the prior generations were greater than his or greater than him, and there's some sort of a legacy that's been passed on, which is now being squandered. So, and this might be a thought about the country itself, and it used to be a great country in his eyes, and now it's all going to hell. It's all becoming terrible for one reason or another. Kids have, funny things in their ears and their noses and green hair and all that, right? Everything's going to shit. So it could be this sort of expression of his pessimism about the way the world is going, which really feels like, very personal to him too. Like he's disappointed in himself. He hasn't delivered on his promise somehow. And there's that bit I think is so important when he's talking to Ellis and he says, I always thought somehow God would come into my life, and he hasn't. And which I'm pretty sure is the only time the word God is mentioned in the film. It's that one and only reference. I think for Ed Tom, that could be largely literal. He's talking about God, and I think it's also metaphorical. He's talking about something more, that he thought his life would add up to something. It would make sense. He thought that, again, it goes back to this thing I was saying earlier about the longing for a resolution, and how traditional narratives and stories structure makes us feel like we should get a resolution at some point and everything should become clear. There should be an epiphany that makes sense of everything. And if you live a certain amount of time, you start to feel like, okay, that's not going to happen. That's not how life works, Like if you're lucky, I think you have momentary epiphanies that sort of, it feels in that moment like it makes sense, but then they pass and you go back to ordinary life. And maybe if you're not so lucky, you don't even have any of those. But it's a daily grind, right? It's one day after another and one foot after another. And if you're waiting for the magic moment that brings everything together so that it all makes sense. I mean, so again, he's mentioned God, right? I mentioned Christianity, when we talked about this in the first part, like this is part of the Christian story. The return of Jesus, the return of God is sort of the magic moment when everything gets resolved and makes sense and it all adds up and there's meaning to it. The meaning for Christianity is always sort of in the future and we're working towards it. And it's going to be that ultimate, return of God to the earth. If that's the way you think about your own life and you think about meaning, then I think either you manage to stick to that story until the end and keep hoping and waiting for it, or you get to a certain point, you get disillusioned. I think, look, it's not going to happen. That's not really life, is it? That's not how it works. And so Ed Tom is at that point. So that, and both of the dreams in a way can be about that. But the second one to me, that's more the first one where he screws up, he loses the money and so on. The second one, to say what's obvious about it, he's like a child and his father's there to take care of him, and it's very comforting in that way. But of course, again, it's set against this much larger darkness, which is frightening. And then he wakes up, and of course, his father isn't there. He realizes his father is dead. And of course, and I'll mention the last thing I'll mention that in the Cormac McCarthy novel, that's how the novel ends as well. The novel that McCarthy published after this was The Road, and there's definitely some imagery there about the father and the son and the fire and all that really is echoed or sort of pre-echoed here. So McCarthy, and by the time, well, wait, when did The Road come out? Well, I don't remember.
The Road came out, I believe, then it was his next novel.
Yeah. So there's some clear allusions in the novel to McCarthy's next novel, and The Road, of course, is an apocalyptic story where essentially a lot of people have been killed. There's been some sort of apocalypse, never gets clarified what it is. And there's a father and son who spend most of the novel, if I'm right, traveling and, just trying to find somewhere safe. So it's sort of the story of his second dream writ large in a lot of ways. But other than that, I'm not sure exactly. It's very interesting to me that neither dream is very detailed. Certainly the first one is extremely quick, but neither of them is very detailed. And they're in a way a little hard to interpret beyond the various obvious interpretations. But the emotions to me are clear, anxiety, sadness, just this overwhelming sense of sorrow. And to go back to generations of fathers and sons, Peters, as you've been bringing up a couple times, I mean, it's this moment, the fact that the movie begins with Ed Tom talking a little about his father and then ends with him talking about these dreams, both of which feature his father. I think they tell us a lot about his inner life and where he is in his life. And maybe too, the fact that he mentions that his father never reached the age where he is now. He's chronologically more of a man than his father ever became, but he doesn't feel like a man. He should be, by his own lights, I think he should be in command of things at this point. He should understand things. He should know how they work. And he doesn't think he's achieved any of that.
Nice. I thought you said you didn't have anything to say.
Yeah, well, I thought I didn't. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, I have many of those same thoughts because I was thinking, like, again, as you said, it starts with discussion of the father and ends with the discussion of the father. And the first one, and so clearly that's significant and symbolic about a lot of what's happening. But the first, and before, as the movie begins, it's a lot of its admiration for the father, like how proud he was of him. He's proud of himself. His dad was proud of him. How much he always wants to sit and listen to what the old timers have to say. It's a very, nostalgic, a positive sort of thing. At the end, it's about the disappointment he's been to his father. His father gave him something and he's lost it. The heritage was his life as a lawman. He got that from, in the book, I'm not sure it was I think it might have been the grandfather, but anyway, but he's somehow failed to live up to that inheritance or that gift from the elders. And so the first one to me expressed his shame and sense of failure. The second one I read as a kind of anticipation of his own death, because the dark, cold country that the father's in is the land of the dead. And his father's waiting for him there. And he does have the sense that, when he reaches him there, there'll be some kind of small, fire. His father hasn't abandoned him. And maybe there's some promise of reconciliation or love once he crosses over. But that's not where we are. We're still alive and we're still in reality. So I saw that as a presentiment of his future mortality, and the first one being a sense of his own failure and disappointment.
I was thinking I had a maybe unorthodox. I agree with everything you guys said. Great analyses, and I don't even agree with perhaps what I'm going to say now. But I was thinking another way to look at the first dream, or as aspects of it where it might reflect sort of the values of Bell in the world. Notice that the world of the Mexican cartels and the two kids at the end, the world is in 1980 is driven by, we mentioned this kind of neoliberal accumulation, wealth, money, and perhaps the first dream is that Bell is not really interested in money. It's not important to him. It's not that life, that pursuit. Maybe that's part of what puts your soul at hazard, is following that materialistic. So the fact that he has this money and he loses it, and that's the dream, right? The second dream, another interpret or a different, not inconsistent, but, and this goes back to a theme I talked earlier, where Bell is trying to figure out he's trying to figure out how to retain masculinity in a world that doesn't value old men. And I think maybe the dream might be a kind of, the father may, in his reflections now upon his retirement, the father may provide a path or an enlightenment for how he is to transition from youth and vigor and masculinity in one sense, and what it means to be a masculine man in his old age. So the flame as to say, I'm going to give you guidance how to be a man as you start to not only transition from youth to old age, but as you mentioned, Peter, from old age to death. So those are some other thoughts to just throw into the can when we're talking about it.
Nice.
The last thing I want to say is, I know this may start a fight, but I just want to say that there was a study done by two psychologists who deal with psychopaths, and that what they did an interesting study. They watched 400 films in Hollywood history dating back to like the 30s, and any film that had depictions of psychopaths or sociopathic killers. And according to their study, the results were that Anton Chigurh is the most accurate cinematic interpretation or personification. It's the most realistic version of a psychopath. And they compared him to, the guy's name is Richard Kuklinski. I think he was called the Ice Killer. And they had worked on his case apparently. And Chigurh was the closest to Kuklinski as far as their estimation. So whether or not, now that's different than
I assume
saying
that's mostly because of the haircut.
it's the haircut. I think that's a psychotic haircut. It's not to say that
It's really the barber who cut him. That's an allusion back to the man who wasn't.
the man who wasn't there. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. You know, I think for me, when I think of someone like the people who strike me as psychopathic in my folk notion is someone like Norman Bates, for example, or, you know, Brad Pitt's character from California. But, you know, in reading this study, which I did, and they quantify, they picked out certain properties of psychopaths, clinical diagnoses. And, you know, it was kind of it wasn't a willy-nilly study. Anyway, I thought it was really interesting.
I think it is really interesting. Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
we had disagreement a few months ago on that.
Yeah, Robert and I argued about this in the past. That's what I think he's alluding to. And I wanted to let you know that I'm on your side now. I'm convinced. I was arguing in the past that he seemed inhuman. I thought he more almost like a, you know, allegorical, fabulistic kind of being who's, you know, almost supernatural in the way he can find you, and the way he's invincible, and you know, cut off from all human connections of any kind. But to prepare for this podcast, I probably watched this like 10, 20 times. I mean, I've been watching and watching and watching it. And I see
That's
more
good
of
for
his
your
humanity
mental
now.
health. You might not want to watch.
I notice we're all wearing black, by the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've seen more of his humanity now. And reading the book, I read the book last week, and I see more of his humanity now. So I'm convinced now, Robert. I'm with you. He's a.
I'm glad you came over to the dark
I came over.
dark human side.
Hey, by the way, I thought there was an interesting thing that almost symbolically said something about the film. It was kind of related to this. The hotel where the Carson is killed, and that hotel was also used in Easy Rider and
Nice.
Kentucky and John Carpenter's Vampires, which is a film I hate, but I love John Carpenter, but that film I just didn't like, except for the snake dance part. But anyway, but I was thinking like a monster, and like if Easy Rider is about like the violent, suppressive core of United States. In a way, they captured both those backdrops in Chigurh. I think he captured both the monstrousness of Carpenter, and the troubling qualities of Easy Rider too.
If I could, I just want to quote from the study. It says, quote, Anton Chigurh is a well-designed, prototypical, idiopathic primary psychopath. And then they start to list some things. Sufficient detailed information as behavior, the following diagnosis of active idiopathic psychopathy: incapacity for love, absence of shame, absence of remorse, cold-blooded attitude, ruthlessness, determination, lack of empathy. Actively invulnerable and resistant to any form of emotion or humanity. Most similar to Richard Kuklinski. So that's pretty twisted.
Wow.
Yeah, as skeptical as I can be of psychobabble and that sort of thing. I've come around, Robert. I've come around. It sounds right.
I think that's
about, anybody who would use the word Scroogey is also got to be a psychopath too. I mean, what the fuck?
That's about those are my cinematic plot character observations. Why don't you guys take over?
I don't think I actually have it. I think everything I had has been covered, other than obviously we still have to talk about the motel room scene. So we'll come to that, I'm sure.
Are we talking about other
first
comparisons with other films here in this?
If you want, if there's some that haven't come up, I think sure, go for it.
I want to read you my list, and I'll show you, how some of this evolution. Well, first was, of course, Big Lebowski. I mentioned already, Terminator, because of the relentlessness of this. Terminator is just, he's going to get you kind of thing. Like when he comes around the corner after Llewellyn, he's not even hiding or anything. He's just like marching towards, here comes death, or it follows. It's like that it follows thing. Halloween, because Michael Myers, he's similarly invincible. He's relentless. He's a killer. The Plague. I mean, I think it's not. I don't know if there's a film version of it, but Carson Wells compares Chigurh to the bubonic plague, and I thought like that's what more when I was on the symbolic level with him. He's like the plague, like Camus saw as the plague. The plague in Camus' novel is symbolic of the Nazis, but it's also, I think, symbolic of nihilism and of people who have in a way embraced death and destruction and the end of meaning. Whereas Camus, you have to rebel. Sure, the universe is meaningless. There's a kind of nihilism in that, in the sense it actually describes that the universe is meaningless. But the response to it has to be a kind of rebellion where you won't be, undertaken by it, and you'll create your own meaning, despite that. Whereas Chigurh seems to become, an agent of the plague, of nihilism, if not Nazism, but. So I think there's a analogy to be made with the plague there, which also happens in a desert too, by the way. But it's Algeria, it's a different desert. Zulu, in the sense that you've got these white Europeans who are being besieged by these dark killers who are relentless and finally overtake them. The difference, and we're supposed to sympathize in that film with the white British soldiers. I remember seeing it as a kid, and it's like being really impressed by that later. I was like, shit, they're the bad guys. I mean, what the hell? Like, I'm with the Zulus today. But still, that's that sense of this relentless force that's going to overwhelm you. And similarly Texas, my friends, has to be the Alamo, and the onslaught of Mexicans, and the way that these Texas lawmen are going to be overwhelmed by it. They can't take the measure of it. They're overwhelmed. Um, the road we talked about, Michael Clayton, in the sense that here's a guy like Sheriff Bell he's part of a system that's corrupt, but he has a moral insight, and that moral insight leads him. Now, of course, he prevails in the end. I love that that scene where he confronts Tilda Swinton. That's so great. That's such a satisfying comeuppance to the villain. But still, the sense that there's this massive dark force out there that's coming to get you. I mean, like that moment when his car explodes and he's up there with the trinity of horses. It was a very powerful scene, I thought. And in Michael Clayton's realization of the dark forces that arrayed around him that he's been part of, I mean, that I felt like there's something in there. And then Silence of the Lambs, because I mean, you want to compare Chigurh and Hannibal Lecter, but Lecter, of course, is in a way more compassionate and human. It's almost as like his psychopathy is a kind of quirk. It's an element of his total personality, whereas for Chigurh, so Chigurh might be more like Buffalo Bill in a way, although the psychology is different there, of course, too. But there's still something deeply chilling about Chigurh. And I guess also I want to say about Silence of the Lambs, there's something troubling about the response, the reception of No Country. You can't help, and I mean, maybe I worry about this in myself too, but it's the way people lionize Chigurh. They see the horror in him, but he's still kind of cool and kind of attractive to some viewers just because of the purity of his evil. And that's something Hollywood will do, and they did that with Lecter. There's both something delightful about Lecter and horrifying too. And I find that, troubling. It's a bit in a sort of moral critiquey way, but anyway, those are the films that came to my mind about this one.
Great list.
Yeah.
Well, fellas, what do you say at this point? Drum roll, please. Now we're going to solve the mystery, the motel mystery,
The motel mystery.
The motel mystery.
Call it.
Call it, Robert.
Let's do the How about we'll do the following? I did a little took an inventory online. So I distilled it down to 7 theories here, and I thought what I would do is just let me go through and list them. Okay, here's the idea. Let's list the theories, then let's agree that some of them are either just untenable or maybe just unlikely, and then let's hear what you guys have to say, and then we can go from there, because it is the motel mystery. Now, if you don't know what the motel mystery is, towards the end of the film, and it is based on this does happen in the novel, but it doesn't happen in the novel the way that it happens in the film. After Moss is gunned down at the motel, and at the end of the day, all the police tape is up and things have sort of calmed down. It's nighttime. Bell decides to go back to the room, the scene of the crime. As you mentioned, Troy, another return to the scene of the crime. And he approaches the hotel room. And what we're shown on the screen is that it appears that behind the door is Anton Chigurh, and he's sort of hiding in the shadows, looking at the door. And Bell's looking at the door. And you have this moment where, going back to our talking about the traditional Western, you think, here it is. This is the showdown. This is what we've been waiting for, right? This is the big payoff. Bell versus Chigurh. And then the door swings open. He kind of kicks the door open. Bell kicks the door open. And Chigurh apparently is nowhere to be found. In fact, he's obviously not behind the door. And I'm not even, if it's okay with you guys, I'm not even going to entertain the theory that he's behind the door. He's not behind the door, right? I don't want to waste my time with that.
What? I think he's behind the door.
Okay, well then we'll throw that one out there. We'll put that in. I'll be my.
Damn it, Peter! You're gonna make us waste our time with that.
That'll be theory 8. Let me get to that one. But anyway, and so the question has been now for what, almost 20 years. What the hell is going on in that scene? So now let me go through the theories and then we can eliminate and then we can focus our discussion. So let's start out with, I'll insert it as theory one. Theory one is he's actually still behind the whole time. When Bell kicks open the door, Chigurh is behind the door. Theory two, Chigurh is not in that room. He's in the adjacent room. Just to clarify, the room that Moss had rented, the room where his body is found, where he's lying dead, is room 114. The adjacent room to the right is room 112. Looking at the way the doors and the windows are in the room, they're not identical. They're symmetric. They're kind of mirror. So they're not identical rooms. They may be, like I said, they may be reflexively symmetric, as they say in the world of math, but they're not identical. So theory two is that he's in the adjacent room. Okay. Theory three, Chigurh's in the room, but when Bell walks in, Chigurh escapes. He managed to leave the room without Bell seeing him. Theory four is Chigurh is still in the room, but he's hiding. He's hiding in the ventilation system, or he's hiding under the bed. So now that would be a callback to what was
the Lady Killers, right? Tom Hanks under the bed. And the Lady Killers. Yeah. Professor, what are you doing having tea down there?
And also, it would be a callback to what was the one where he's under the bed with the machine gun?
In Miller's Crossing, does Leo get under the bed when they're coming up? Maybe he does. I'd have to go rewatch it to know. Anyway. I don't know. I just think about Professor Dorr having his tea. Anton Chigurh might be having tea under that bed too. Come to think of it.
So theory four is that Chigurh he's in the room, but he's hiding. Either under the bed or he crawled into the ventilation system. Theory five is Chigurh was in the room earlier, but he left. Theory six is that Chigurh is actually a ghost. Theory seven is that Chigurh's image is a manifestation of Tom's anxiety, his fear. So it's a sort of imaginary manifestation of Tom, what's going on in his mind. And the last theory is, and there may be more, the last theory is, and this is Troy's and some other people's theory, is that the Coens purposely create a scene that not even the audience can understand. And so we are put in the same kind of epistemological position as Bell is in. So those are the 8 theories. Now, let me go through them, and you guys say whether you want to put them in the untenable category. So it sounds like theory 1, Chigurh is behind the door. You want to keep that one viable. Okay, how about Chigurh is in the adjacent room? Anybody thumbs up or thumbs down on that?
I would say thumbs up on that. It has some problems for sure, but all these theories have problems. I think if we're just deciding whether they're viable, it's one of the more viable ones. Still not very good.
It's viable, but unlikely, I think, but it's viable.
Yeah, I think I'm going to put that. I wrote to that one. I put highly unlikely.
Yeah.
How about Chigurh is in the room, but he escapes. He runs out at some point.
Less likely.
I don't like it. I don't think we can rule it out 100%.
Well, we saw that Tom went into the bathroom and the back window was locked. So the only way out would have been through the front door.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's put it this way. I'm not asking. Here's the question I'm asking. Let's reconceptualize. Which of these theories do you want to talk about?
Okay. We don't need to talk about that one.
I don't think we need to talk about that.
No,
left the room.
We just did.
Nah.
I think it's untenable.
We just did. Exactly. That's plenty.
How about
all the attention it deserved.
Chigurh was there earlier, and what they're showing us is it's temporally out of balance. So when they pan into Chigurh, that's like an hour or whatever, and then they go out. So he was in the room, but the Coens are showing us 2 different time periods.
Why is he crouched against the wall like that, as if somebody's about to come in?
Look, I didn't make this stuff up.
No.
Okay. How about he's hiding under the bed or in the ventilation system?
The sock drawer. He's in the sock drawer, man. I'm telling you.
Ventilation system's too small and
Totally
the bed
too
is
small.
probably too low.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Out.
How about
Terrible.
Shiger as a ghost?
No.
I mean, it's suggested by Sheriff Roscoe after they meet when Ed Toms comes to see, which I thought was a tender scene, actually. When, the sheriff
It's a nice scene. Yeah.
comes to see Llewellyn's body. In the book, it's both the 15-year-old girl and Llewellyn. But
I think in the movie, at least, I think it's Ed Tom who suggested, isn't it? And I don't know if he's serious or not, but he says he might as well be a ghost, or he's like
you're
a
right.
ghost or something.
You're right.
And then the other guy says, no,
Roscoe
he's
says he's a
real.
lunatic. Yeah, and he says
Yeah.
he's not a lunatic. I think he might be a ghost.
Yeah.
I'm more inclined
He gets hit by a car at the end of the movie. He's no ghost.
He's no ghost. Yeah.
He's no ghost.
Well, yeah, and I was gonna say there's no other suggestion, anything else to suggest it really.
He's weird, but he's not a ghost. Enough people see him too. That he's not a ghost.
And also, if we can use the book as any evidence, he literally says in the book, "I've seen him and he's real."
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
He
Yeah, and
says-
Llewellyn saw him. Remember, Carson's like, "You saw him, huh?"
Yeah. People have seen him. Yeah, for sure.
So,
And he's done
all right.
stuff. The
So
woman
now-
at the trailer park saw him. So yeah, he's no ghost.
All right. So what do you say we start now? I'm fascinated. I got to say, I want to jump right in because Peter, I'm fascinated with, and let me tell you, Troy and I for years, because we have a colleague, may he rest in peace, Dennis Rothermel, who we went to see. We did go to Sacramento, Troy, and we saw with Dennis. We saw No Country for Old Men, and I remember that Dennis's theory was he was behind the door, and then Troy and I, we did independently. We watched and we rewound and we watched the door, and so in my assessment of watching that scene and focusing many times, my conclusion is there is no way physically that Anton Chigurh, he's a big guy, he is not behind the door. But Peter, let's hear the argument for how he's behind the door.
My own settled opinion actually is the one about that the Coens are presenting us with something intentionally inscrutable, and so that's actually where my own mind is settled. But
That's just because Troy, that's his theory. But I want to.
I suggested it to Troy. I think.
Oh, okay.
That's not true.
Okay,
That's not true.
let's
but
hear
I
your
think
argument.
people are likely to arrive at that independently because I think it does make sense once you start thinking about the film. The reason about that I'm open to him being behind the doors, I similarly have rewatched and watched, and while I think it's a tough one, he would have been tightly squeezed in there. I think it's physically possible, and here's the conjunction with it. It just makes for better drama. I mean, the idea that they almost met and that he's lurking behind the door, but it didn't quite happen. I like the drama of that. I like.
I would, if that were the case, the movie would drop, and I would say it's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Just
this is why we get into fight. This is why I go with Troy's more often. Actually, this is what drives me to Troy, right there.
Troy, what do you think about this? Does that enhance?
I got to side with you on this one. No, it's terrible. It's just not. He's clear. We can see that he's not behind. This is not up for debate. He's not there. There's no way he's there. It's no.
I mean, the light. I went back just as we were talking. The light coming through the hole. I looked at both doors as the sheriff approached. It looks pretty clear to me that there's only one lock has been blown out. Maybe it's true he didn't use the blower thing on the other room, but
wait, that's
that's a different. You're talking about the adjacent room theory.
No,
right?
I know.
So, yeah,
I know. So I
the other theories definitely have their problems.
We're doing one theory at a time. Okay, not
all right.
But
in order for the inscrutability, okay, here's another take on it. In order for the inscrutability thesis to work,
hold on. Can we just focus on the behind the door theory?
Yes, the behind the door theory has to be plausible, because otherwise you don't feel that tension about what's going on here.
No. Let me give you another argument why, aside from it's physically impossible for the corporal body of Anton Chigurh to be behind the door. If the Coen brothers wanted that to be an option, the door would have opened slowly and not gotten to the wall all the way. But there's a reason why he
It bangs
kicks the
the door.
door open and it bangs against. That's not a coincidence. It's not like they said, "Hey, doesn't matter." You know the Coen brothers. They said, "Kick the door open and have it bang against the wall." So my view is that's just more evidence that he's not behind the. They could have
okay,
left,
but
they could have
there's
left
a
a question mark. They could
There's
have
a flip side to that. Why doesn't the sheriff open the door? I mean, close the door and look behind it. He looks everywhere else in the freaking room. But
because
we've already
he's-
established
Because the
he's
door
already-
hit the wall. He doesn't have to look behind it to hit the wall. There's no way for anybody to be back there.
Here's what I want you to do. Get up right now.
It's not a thorough search.
No,
It's not a
Peter,
thorough search.
get up out of your chair and go stand behind the door and tell me how much room you have. Tell me if it's possible.
I'm not at
And we want all of our
Carol-
listeners to go do this as well,
at
please.
the-
Go,
I'm
go
not
stand
in
behind
El
your doors.
Paso.
I want all of our listeners who, especially those who think that he's behind there, get up right now, stand behind your door and tell me if it's possible for you to do.
And
it.
shout,
Okay.
I'm mad as hell. I'm not. Oh, sorry, that's something else.
All
It's
right,
not
so-
inscrutable because by your reasoning, it's just like clear that he's not there. So there's nothing inscrutable about it.
Well, okay.
It's
So
some
why
things are
sh- why
clear.
show
Wait,
him there
it's
behind
not
it?
clear where he is. It is clear that he's not behind the door. That is
So
clear.
you think the depiction of him there crouched in the corner was just,
I don't know what it
what's
is.
that
I
about?
don't know what
It's
it is.
imagination.
Now let's go to the one where he's in the neighboring room, and you guys thought that was worth talking about. I don't think it's personally worth talking about because the neighboring room doesn't have the lock knocked out, and also
Right.
because it's not identical. The way
He
that
would-
Sugar
exactly.
is hiding against the wall,
Right.
that's asymmetric. That's
Right.
not symmetric with the room shape,
Right.
right? Like he'd
Yeah.
be on
And
the
if he
other
were
wall.
there without the sheriff, he wouldn't crouch in the corner. What the hell would he be hiding from? He'd just go in, get the money, and leave. Which is right. Why would he be
why-
Well, no,
crouching?
wait. Now we're imagining now he's in the adjacent room when
No,
the
no.
sheriff is in the other room, right? So,
no.
so
Yeah,
he's
well-
crouching in case the sheriff comes into that room. But I agree with you guys that there's a lot of evidence against it. It doesn't really work. It's not good.
Well, did we? Now I've forgotten about this one. Did we say we were going to talk about he secretly escapes the room somehow?
Nah, that's
No, we did
that's-
talk about that. The bathroom
Yeah, the
window's
window.
locked.
There's a
That's
reason
not
why.
weird.
Here's what's interesting. Not only do they show us that the bathroom window is locked, they show Tom Bell
Bell,
looking
right.
at the window and
Mhm.
seeing that it's locked. So that's there for a reason. Okay.
Yeah.
And we also agree he's not under the bed. And okay. Now, what did we say about the theory that's temporally disjointed? So earlier that day, Shigur is hiding behind the door for some reason.
yeah.
Why? That's what I was saying. Why? There's no
Okay.
reason from the crouch. if
Right.
it's
There's no reason to
earlier in the
hide.
day.
All right.
Yeah.
Plus,
So
it would be
now-
light out.
And it's dark. Right. It can't be
Dark.
much earlier in the day. Yeah.
We
Maybe he comes
dismissed-
back 2 weeks later and he does that. And that's we're
No,
just seeing
because
it
the
flash
grill is
forward.
open. The grill's open. Even though he's been there.
How about so we dismissed the ghost theory?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're going to hit on the two theories that I think that I wanted to talk about because one of them is my theory and the other one is your two theories. And before I do this, I want to say before I lay out my case,
I want to remind you that we're all good friends here.
we're philosophers. So, and I want to rely on the book too. I want to bring in the book because I think it's fair game. But I wanted to say one important thing is, so my theory is that it is a manifestation of what's going on inside Tom's head. It's not. There's no. Before we do that, going back to the ghost theory, can we all agree that nowhere in this film is there anything supernatural that takes place?
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So, on my view, this is what we're seeing as a manifestation of Ed Tom's fear, his anxiety about entering the room. Now, the other theory that we're going to discuss, which is the theory that the Coen brothers, made this inscrutable thing. So you go, not only is Tom Bell witnessing something that he can't understand, but so is the audience. Here's what I want to clarify. I call this the narrative story versus the meta-narrative story. And here's what I want to say. The theory that Shigur is a manifestation of Tom Bell's fear is perfectly consistent with the meta theory that the reason the Coen brothers did this is because they wanted you to experience this kind of inscrutability in this lack of understanding in the same way that Bell is having. I think they're consistent for the following reason: is they answer two different questions. The question I'm interested in this theory is in the narrative itself, not at the meta level of, I'm not asking why did the Coens, I'm asking in the story of, in the world of No Country for Old Men, what the hell is going on? What is happening there? That's what I want to answer. I think the meta question answers the question, why did the Coen brothers create that? And I think those are two different questions. Maybe they're not. I think they are. So now I'm going to give my argument for why I think that Tom Bell is imagining this. And again, it's going to rely on the book. And I did find one human being that I looked when I was looking. There's someone else besides me in the world who came up with this, so independently. So when I read the book, it's an important part of Tom Bell's background, and you don't get this. Number one, his father wasn't a sheriff. His grandfather was a sheriff. The pressure came from the grandfather to be, this kind of sheriff, this traditional sheriff. And Bell comes home from World War II and he gets elected. He has a commendation, Medal of Honor for bravery in this certain situation. But in the scene with Ellis in the book, when he goes to Ellis, there's no talk about ain't much has changed or ain't nothing new here. Here's what happens in the book. He goes to Ellis and he confesses for the first time. And he hasn't even told his wife, apparently, because he says, she'll still love me. But in the book, he says, I was a coward. In World War II, I was in charge of the men, and a shell came and they were trapped in this place. And when night fell, I just left. I thought like that was my only way to survive. And let me build it a little bit more. In the movie, he says, like, I knew when I took this job, part of the job was putting my life at risk. That's part of the job. And that's true. But in the book, he says, when I joined the army, part of joining the army, part of my job was to die for my men. And there's a passage I wanted to read in the book, and it's a beautiful passage, and McCarthy's brilliant. He has this phrase that I wanted to focus on, but let me read you what he says in the book. This is Tom Bell talking to his uncle Ellis. He says, but you go into battle, it's a blood oath to look after the men with you. And I don't know why I didn't. I wanted to. When you're called on like that, you have to make up your mind that you'll live with the consequences. But you don't know what the consequences will be. You end up laying a lot of things at your own door that you didn't plan on. If I was supposed to die over there doing what I gave my word to do, then that's what I should have done. You can tell it any way you want, but that's the way it is. I should have done it, and I didn't. And some part of me has never quit wishing I could go back. I can't. I didn't know you could steal your own life. And I love that phrase. I didn't know you could steal your own life. That's just amazing way that he's interpreting this moment of power.
That's powerful.
So, okay, now, so that's my first part, is that he has this, Tom Bell has left his men and he feels crappy about it. And so on my view, what's happening is that he imagines, because, he says right before this, right, he's having the conversation with his buddy right before he goes there. Is he a psychopath? Is he a ghost? This is something I can't understand. This is no country for old, right? It's all built up that this force is something, it's so overwhelming. He's going to retire. So this is what he's faced with. He's faced with finally, he goes back. Why does he even go back there? I think he's going back there because it's a chance to get a redo. So what I think is he's imagining what is on the other side of that door. It's the only time we see him, he's scared. When he's in the car, he turns the car off and you look at his face and there's a moment before he gets out where he sort of like takes a breath and says, I got to do this, right? So I think it's a vision Shigur is a vision in his mind. It's the representation of the worst thing that is waiting for Bell behind that door. Now, notice a couple of other things. He hesitates when he gets out of the car, right? And he walks up to the door. Now, in any police training, what do? You open the door, you have your gun drawn, and you assume a certain posture. But notice Bell doesn't do that. It's almost as if Bell this is his moment of reckoning. He's like, I'm going to accept what's behind the door, whatever it is behind the door. So he opens the door. But I want to go back to this issue of the showdown. Notice something really interesting. Who he's faced with is his own shadow. He literally looks across the room, and it looks like a classic Gary Cooper high noon showdown. It's Bell versus his shadow, and he's looking straight ahead, and you see the silhouette of the lawman with his gun and everything. And so what makes sense to me in the narrative of the film, not in the meta-narrative, is that what we're seeing is what his worst fear realized, but it's his anxiety. But the reason he does it is because he's so guilt-ridden his whole life that this is his chance to get a do-over. And so that's what happens. There you go. There's my best argument for the Sheriff Bell's imagination theory.
I actually think that's plausible about him imagining. I love, by the way, the idea. You're so right that he's confronting his shadow there, and his shadow side is the cowardly soldier, whatever.
And this is an echo of something we saw earlier, where when they're in Moss's house.
Let me finish.
Sorry, go ahead. Yes,
that's exactly right, because it's part of my argument against. But there's several reasons I think I'm not inclined to that view, even though I think there's something really compelling about it, especially the confrontation with himself. That I agree with, but he can't imagine Shigur behind the door in the way he is, because I don't think he's ever seen him. Well, the second thing is, if he's really going to, overcome his fears, he's got to close the door and he's got to look around the room more. I think he actually still was a little bit afraid and let that door stay where it was and left and went home. And that's when he went to see Ellis, by the way. And when he goes to see Ellis, a remark we haven't mentioned, it's true. He says, like, God didn't come to me, but he also says, I would have a bad opinion of myself just as God does. He's not redeemed at all. He's still, in fact, that may be the moment he decided he really needs to quit, because he could not look behind the door. So I agree with some of it, but what's your answer to, like, how do you imagine?
Okay, hold on. One, I don't know why you're obsessed with this behind the door. He didn't look behind the door because he kicked the door open and he's obviously not there.
So
I find it fascinating that you think he doesn't look behind the door because he's afraid. Why does he go in the bathroom? He's afraid. Why does he run out? Why doesn't he?
He runs out of steam. I mean, he's got his courage, but it fails him.
My answer ties into you and Troy's meta theory, because I said they're consistent, right?
Yeah.
So they want to show us. So here's what Tom Bell is afraid of. His fear is that he's going to come face to face with this monster. So he has to imagine what the monster looks like. Now you might say, well, how does he imagine? How does it look like Javier Bardem? How does he know that?
Exactly.
And what I want to say is, well, I guess they could put like some guy behind the door. Then the audience would go, who's that guy behind the door? Or they could put a demon behind the door.
Okay, what they could have done was, and this is where you go back to Troy's thing, because that's the second thing I've forgotten in a second there, but was that they've prefigured this with the visit to Llewellyn Moss's place. In Llewellyn Moss's place, it was clear that he was a coward there too. He has Wendell go in first. He has Wendell with his gun drawn. He stays outside to see if Wendell is going to get shot at.
Wait, so
and they barely miss the guy.
Wait.
And so if they were going to, so that prefigures it all. The second thing is, if it was going to be something imagined, they'd have prefigured that too, with the sheriff imagining something here or there, but they never do. They're not going to just throw in suddenly, oh, guess what? Sheriff imagines things here and there, and we see them visualized in the screen. That's not what happens. So there's suddenly at the end of the film, they're going to introduce this technique that hasn't been used without the film. No, they're not going to. What they're going to do is refer back to the setting that they've already set up. with the visit to Llewellyn Moss's house, and it was the visit of a coward. And his cowardice is also evident, by the way, when he won't meet with the DEA agents. He won't meet with them because he feels himself a small, puny, unequal, small-time sheriff, and he remembers his shame. So he's a man over and over who demonstrates shame, cowardice, and has he overcome it there? He's trying, I agree, but he hasn't finally done it. And that's why when he goes to Ellis's house, he still thinks in the eyes of God, he's not worth much.
So here's a possibility. The Coens, here's what he does. He comes to the door, takes out his gun, and he pushes the door open.
Mm-hmm.
Opens, like 75%, enough for him to walk in the door.
Yeah.
And everything, and then just
could have done
everything.
that, yeah.
Everything keeps going.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is like, that would be stronger evidence that he's behind the door.
Yeah.
But even in that case, what is perplexing is knowing Anton Chigurh, is he really going to just sit behind?
Yeah, he would just kill him, wouldn't he?
And he's going to just wait until he creeps. I mean, Chigurh is, have we ever seen him just hide? I don't think, he doesn't seem like the kind of person who would hide. And secondly, the fact that they have him kick the door or, shove the door and it bangs against the wall.
It bangs, it really does.
That to me is like,
yeah.
Because they could have done it another way. They could have had, like I said, they could have done it where you're like, holy shit, he doesn't see him behind the door. So anyway, but let me just say, just last thing. And then
okay.
A couple of things. One is the theory, any of these sort of what I'm calling narrative level theories, some of them we agree are like, he's not hiding in the ventilation. I mean, when you look at the ventilation, I don't even think a person could fit in that little.
No, there's no way.
It's like
no.
It's crazy to me that this theory is
way.
out there. It's so obvious that he couldn't have gone in there.
So that's a theory, but that we all agree. But what I want to say is, just to clarify, I think we did clarify, but just to clarify again is, I fully agree. We'll talk just in a moment, get back into the kind of what I'm calling the meta theory, which is what you think, what you guys are thinking is the solution. And I'm going to say, I agree 100%. Just to clarify, I think that the theory that I'm putting forth, that is, that I think I laid out, as clearly as I could using quotes in the book and stuff.
Yeah.
To me, that's perfectly consistent with your view, which I agree with. So it's not like it's one or the other, because so the question is, what were the Coen brothers thinking, and then what's happening in the narrative? But last thing I want to say, and then I want to hear this more about the meta theory, is they don't prefigure it, Peter, as you said. They could have prefigured it. It's like, it's such a weird thing to do. If on my view, my view would be weird. And I want to say, here's what I want to say. It's like an argument of parody. It's the whole thing is weird. As you mentioned, every possible solution has to deal with this weird thing that they don't prefigure it, unless he's behind the door. And I want to say, to me, he's just not behind the door. So that's why I'm like, I eliminate that one.
Yeah.
So, and the second thing is, I told this to Troy. Part of it is, I don't think the evidence, I like this story, and maybe I think there is evidence for my view of Bell sort of facing his cowardice.
I love that part with the shadow. Yeah.
With the shadow.
Yeah.
I think there's evidence for that. But there's also something else that I need to like put my cards on the table and reveal is, I have a huge soft spot for the plight of Bell, and that also colors the way that I see him. I think there's evidence to say that he's no longer a coward, but I also feel like I personally, when I watch that film, as someone who is aging myself, thinking about, manhood and masculinity out of your, physical prime, Bell just resonates with me, the sort of the dilemma that he's faced with, and sort of the existential question of what does it mean to be a man as you age. And so I have so much sympathy and empathy for him that when when you say like, "Oh, he's still a coward," it's like a personal insult. It's like you talk about my buddy Ed Tom Bell like that. So
Come
that's
over here and
part
say
of
Can I
that,
say,
Peter. Put him
I
up.
mean,
Put him
part of
up.
what's motivating my
I was
view.
being a little intemperate at that moment. Can I say I was a little intemperate there? As I thought about that later, because could also just be. Sorry, this would be also insulting to him though. Poor police work. He doesn't look everywhere he should. But yeah, but I hear you.
But I think it's okay. So look,
Who doesn't feel that way these days? My God, especially old guys like us who've spent our years like working the humanities and to see it all like unraveling and shit. It's tough. It's tough.
It's no university for old men at this
It's
point.
no
I'll tell
university
you.
for old men. I'll tell you that.
But let's now go. I think we can
Humanists.
we can put a we can put a cap on this. Let's go to this view, which I love, and and Troy, if you, because you're the one of the three of us, you're the one who first proposed it in our text thread, and that is this kind of what I'm calling the meta view is like the question is like, why did the Coen brothers? Because it's not in the book, right? So the Coen brothers made a decision,
Yeah.
to present us with this. It's utterly perplexing. I mean, when you're watching the film, right, you're like what? Where is this coming from? So
It's perplexing, yeah, of course, because the Coens are such meticulous craftspeople and so careful. They storyboard everything. They plan everything ahead.
Right.
There's no way. And I've seen some people, and I know none of us have this view, but I've seen some people online, for instance, to say, "Oh, they got really sloppy here.
Yeah,
Careless,
yeah.
that
Totally.
they really goofed this up. You
Yeah.
can't even tell what's going on." There was one in particular, I think I shared with you guys, where the person was so upset about, they said that's bad exposition. They don't, resolve it. And then he thought they also didn't resolve the question of whether Carla Jean is killed by Shiger at the end. Of course,
Oh, that's totally.
that's just stupid. I know. You
totally
see him
clear.
check his shoes. You know that he killed her.
And that was
They just
prefigured
don't
when
put
he
it- Oh,
when he
go
killed
ahead.
Carson.
Yeah,
Remember the
he
blood.
checked
He
his
moves his
boots.
boots. Right.
Right, we know he's a fastidious psychopath, and he doesn't want blood on his boots. So
I've seen
Wait.
discussions online, these entire threads of people saying, did he kill Carla Jean?
Of course he did.
Like,
you do not need to debate something that the movie.
I thought that
makes
was some
clear.
really great filmmaking too, because that's
Oh my
all you
God.
needed to show.
Isn't
to
that beautiful?
lift
But they're
up
so
that
good
little-
at that. Look, one of the things that makes the Coen brothers the great filmmakers that they are is that they can tell you stuff without you having to see it, without anyone having to say it.
Mhm.
There's that example from Fargo I always go back to. I think it's so great where Jerry Lundegaard drives up to the parking garage and he finds his father-in-law's dead body. He sits
Yeah.
there for a few seconds, then he pops the trunk.
pops the trunk.
There's no words. You know exactly what's going on. You don't need to say anything. Oh, I put him in the trunk. No, you don't need to
Well,
tell us
Troy,
anything.
wait, we never saw Jerry put his father-in-law in the trunk.
That's right. So maybe he really tied him to the roof or something, or threw him off at the side. Come on, people. This drives me crazy. But right, that's exactly so that's just the wrong response to think, okay,
Right.
they left it unclear because they weren't careful. They didn't think it through,
Right.
Watching it years later, they smacked their foreheads and, oh, we should have cleared up exactly what happened where Shiger was. No. So clearly there is a question here of why they did this, right? What's going on? What are they trying to say? Or what's, or how should we understand the film? That doesn't mean we have to delve into the Coen brothers psychology, but I think, I'm not a total death of the author person. I think it's worth talking about what they wanted.
Yeah.
And Robert, of course, I agree with you, right? Yeah. So there's these two different, questions here. There's the question of what actually did happen within the narrative, and there's the meta level question, and in a way, I'm much more interested in the second question, the sort of meta level, and partly that's because I really do think that, and I don't know if I disagree with you on this or not. I think it's essentially impossible to answer the first question. I think there is no fact of the matter. I know you.
I agree 100%.
Oh, okay, so yeah, so you've got a favorite interpretation.
There are facts of the matter regarding some interpretations.
Yes.
Yes, we can rule some out. That's right.
Yes.
Right, like he's not in the vent, or
He's not, that's right.
So, but I think the kinds of things that we were talking about with my view is I certainly would never go on the record and say there's a fact of the matter, but it's the game of come up with an interesting analysis. And that's
Right. And as far as that goes, look, if somebody said you have to come up with a theory of what happened, narratively speaking, right? I would go with your theory, Robert. He's just imagined. He's not ever there. He's not in the room at all. Ed Tom imagines him before being there, before he, throws open the door. And it's the best theory. I think it's a bad theory, but it's the best theory, right? It's the best one we've got.
Yeah.
There's strong objections to it, but not as strong as the objections to all the other ones. So I'm certainly willing to give you that, but I still don't want to say, well, that's what happened. Certainly, it sounds like you don't either, right? Because that's like Chigurh saying, "Hey, call it," and I'm like, Carla G, no, I'm not going to call it. I don't want to. That's so then what is, what's happening here if not that, or at least why did the Coen brothers?
Well, I think there's something philosophical. I'm sorry.
How so? Yeah, no, go ahead.
So, I mean, of course, I like to weight my theory a little bit more, but it's fun. It seems like we have a situation of under determination here, as they call it in philosophy. Like the evidence doesn't fully determine one interpretation over the other. And on top of that, we have like almost a deconstructive thing here too, where I feel like I think it was intentional, that they put things in the scene that push you in different directions and that defeat certain like interpretations and open the door to others. But then there's a defeater for that one, and then there's a defeater for this one. So they leave you in this condition. Skeptics try to create this condition. They use they call it isosthenia, or balancing. Like you balance these competing interpretations. Supposedly it'll bring you to tranquility eventually, but sometimes it does. It goes the opposite way. It leaves you in an unsettled position. In a way, like Hume is at the end of book 1, part 4, section 7 kind of thing. But where he's like, he's in a skeptical despair. So I think, on the one, it's not only that the evidence doesn't fully determine one interpretation over another, it's also that they intentionally put in problematic elements that make it difficult to accept any interpretation. And that's what they're after, is creating this sense of like, I don't really understand what's happening, because that's what's happening to Ed Tom. And there's so many things about this film that has to do with certainty and uncertainty. Remember, like, again, Chigurh says he's certain he knows what's going to happen to the bag. It doesn't happen to the bag, by the way. Whereas, Carson Wells says, you don't know for certainty. You think you know. And Chigurh wants to always know what's going on, and he always wants to have the truth, or he presents it that way. He may not actually think it's even true, as a nihilist. But anyway, I think they're trying to create that on a meta level, that sense of indeterminacy and confusion and perplexity, and they do it brilliantly, I think.
I agree. Look how much people are still talking about this sequence. It's one of the central sequences in the film. It's so interesting. I think it goes back to the beginning of the film, where, and I'm completely agreeing with you in saying this, Peter, that where Ed Tom says again in that little opening monologue, he's afraid of going out there and coming up against something he doesn't understand. That's his fit, not die. He always understood he might die in the course of doing his job. Feels like he can deal with that. That's just a given. But what really scares him is being confronted with something he doesn't understand, which again, as we've noted, is what happens to Marge at the end of Fargo when she's confronted with Grimsrud. Right. And what we expect, partly on that model, but also just given our standard narrative expectation of stuff will happen here, that both he and Josh Brolin probably will at some point be confronted with Chigurh. But that would be something, in a way, even though Chigurh himself can't be understood in a certain sense, there would still be something understandable about that in a way, because it's narrative convention. That's what we're all expecting. And so if you're going to put the audience in the position where they don't understand what's going on, you have to contravene those expectations.
Exactly.
You have to confuse it. You have to give something that literally doesn't make sense. And now we're really with Ed Tom. We really are faced with something that doesn't make sense. I think, it's a very deep and really sort of, it's a brilliant move, I think, in terms of movie making, the Coens. It's because they don't do this very often at all. And that's part of, again, what makes it so powerful. They're so careful. Their films are filled with stuff that are hard to interpret, and we can debate all day long, as we often do on this podcast, about what it means. But in terms of what you actually see happening, they're so careful to communicate that. It's very rare that you watch anything in a Coen Brothers film and say, wait, what just happened in that sense? Like, I literally don't know, the actions. I couldn't relate them to you. Here they do it to us. And I think, it puts us in this whole, and I like this stuff about skepticism, Peter, that you're bringing up. I think that's really good. There's going to be no resolution, right, in that we get of the sort that we're expecting. And the film just goes in all these different directions. And we walk out of one thing, of course, that's going on, too, is we all have the DVD. We can go back and watch the sequence again and again. if you imagine somebody like after the first time they had seen this, and imagine somebody who doesn't go back and rewatch it, they've only seen it once. They're not going to know for sure whether he was behind the door or where he was. They're going to wonder even if they remembered it right.
Yeah, right.
Right? They're going to be like, wait, there was something. Did I blink? Did I doze off for a second? Was I not paying attention? Like after the first viewing, you would really be not just unsure about what happened in that sequence, but really unsure of yourself,
Right.
how much you were paying attention, because you'd think, well, I don't know what happened. That can't be the way it was filmed. The Coen brothers couldn't have, it was filmed
Yeah.
in a way that I didn't know. I guess I looked away for a minute. I guess I missed something. And
Right.
you have to go back,
You want to go back
watch
and
it
look
again.
which-
Yeah, to see. And then you watch it again. You're like, wait, no, this really doesn't make sense. I didn't miss anything. Like, well, maybe I have to watch it a third time, right? To see. We know how many times people watch this sequence.
So there's a second philosophical thing I want to suggest to you too. This also is
Because I also have
skepticism,
another
but not only. What's that?
I also have another one. So great.
Oh, you do?
Let's-
Okay.
Let's pile them on. Yeah.
Well, one of the things, skepticism has had, historic affiliations with empiricism. One of the things, reasons that skeptics suspend judgment on what they call the hidden. In Greek, it was the ta edela. If it's hidden, if it's beyond what can appear, then you just suspend judgment on it. And Shigor is a creature of the hidden. Even when they show him, in that scene, on the one hand, it's a defeater for a Roberty type interpretation, sense that like there's no way you can imagine him because he's never seen him. But on the other hand, he looks like I used to really like spiders. I had a tarantula and all this kind of stuff, and it's amazing how a spider can really like bunch up real small and get into these little tiny places, and they're hiding all around us all the time, and that's how he looks when he's behind the door there. He's like, but if you think about it, when he kills Carla Jean, he's in her bedroom. He's in a dark, shadowy place. The bedroom is a private back room of the house. When he comes for Carson Wells' boss in the high or the office tower, he comes up the stairs the back ways. He's always like taking off his shoes and prowling around. He's not someone who lives in the light. He's always in darkness or in hidden spaces or back room type spaces. He's that kind of creature, and
he's so offended whenever anyone notices him and said, like the guy in the gas station, I notice where he's from. Right. Yeah. And he's really upset that nobody's supposed to notice anything about him. And so, he says to the guy in the high rise, right, are you going to kill me? Well, that depends. Do you see me?
Right.
He's mostly unseen. He's silent. He leaves. One of the things I love about the captive bolt stun gun thing as a weapon is that it doesn't leave a bullet behind.
There's no bullets.
Right. It's a traceless act in that sense, right? You kill and you take the whole thing with you. You keep the bullet with you.
And even the money's putting into these hidden spaces, the ducts and all that, and behind this or underneath the house and all this. And, I think one of the things that gets communicated is the sense that for skeptics, one reason we suspend judgment on the hidden is you can't make sense of it. You try to make sense of the hidden. It's led us across the history of science and philosophy to try to understand these transcendent things, or these things that are below the phenomenal world or beyond in the noumenal realm or something like this. Whoa, differences. I love that.
Yes.
I'm gonna use that.
I know, it's so good.
But at any rate, so it's another thing. It's about the inscrutability of the hidden, I think, is part
Peter,
of it.
this is a lovely bridge to the other thing I wanted to bring up. And you guys, okay, this is going to push it. You guys might think I'm crazy, but crazy like a fox, I would like to say. I want to talk about that second door, the fact that there's two doors here. I agree, first of all, some people have had the theory Sugar is in the other room, but I agree, as you guys have said, there's evidence it's not that, the light and everything, it wouldn't work, right? He's not in the second room.
Yeah, the light, yeah.
Why though still? It bothered me. Why do they clearly show the two doors and not just one? And both doors are roped off, right, as Tom walks up to it and so on. What's going on here? It bothered me a lot. I thought about this for a long time. I also thought those doors remind me of something, and I'm trying to think of what it is. Well, they actually remind me of two things. One of them is from another Coen Brothers film. It's one we haven't gotten to yet, so I'm going to jump ahead a little. But there's a scene inside Llewyn Davis where there's this long corridor, and there's these two apartments across from each other, and the doors are right across from each other, right? It's a very visually striking scene. And I realized that those two doors really reminded me of these two motel room doors next to each other. And then I want to remind you, and again, I know we haven't, maybe some of our listeners haven't seen this film yet. I don't know. We haven't got there yet. But we all have seen Inside Llewyn Davis. That film is very much about decision points in life and forking paths And I think about the splitting universes and the multiple worlds interpretation of quantum physics and so on. It's got a couple of cats who seem to invoke Schrodinger's cat. Schrodinger's cat is also going to be explicitly mentioned in A Serious Man, which is coming up soon. We've already heard Heisenberg's uncertainty principle discussed in The Man Who Wasn't There by the lawyer Freddie Riedenschneider. We know that the Coens have an interest in quantum physics and in its metaphorical resonances. And so I realized, dwelling on this, the other thing that these two doors next to each other reminded me of is okay, bear with me, the double slit
experiment.
Yes, yes, right. Absolutely, right. The famous double slit experiment originally was just a thought experiment, but they actually managed to do it in the 70s. It was actually done. You have these two slits next to each other, you pass electrons through, and whether or not you get an interference pattern, which is a matter of whether the electrons are behaving as particles or as waves, depends on whether you set up a detection device to determine where the electrons are. So it's addressing that old question of, are electrons particles or waves? It turns out they're both, or neither, or whatever, right? But they have features of both, and it depends on whether they're observed, which makes no sense in terms of our sort of ground level intuitions about how the universe works. So not to get into the nitty gritty, not that I even could, I'm not a physicist, but we could say, for instance, the double slit experiment shows that two things that are distinct and apparently incompatible, at least by our own intuitions, can be true at the same time. Or maybe we could say it shows that our basic intuitions are reliable about the world.
Doing.
Right? See, our basic intuitions don't match the world. So that, first of all, relates to this sort of idea that we have just been building, that the world is fundamentally incomprehensible and unknowable, which is Ed Tom's fear, again, that he expresses at the beginning of the film and what he's forced to confront later on. And again, as I think I mentioned, it's what this film and the next two films are fundamentally about. A Serious Man and Burn After Reading. All these films are about they end with men sitting at desks or tables or not being able to understand what's going on. Think about that line from The Man Who Wasn't There. The more you look, the less you really know. That's what Freddie Riedenschneider said when he brings up the uncertainty principle. That is a nice, it's sort of a simplistic interpretation of the uncertainty principle itself, but it's not totally off. But it's a nice, accurate sort of description of the history of science, especially physics, when classical physics gives way to quantum physics. The more we investigate, rather than getting more certainty about the way the world works, we get less. It's harder and harder for us to actually understand. But it also, of course, matches this scene. The more we examine it, the more we replay it and look at every little frame and so on. We don't end up getting certain, right? Like you said, Peter, we end up seeing that there's objections to every possible within the narrative interpretation. We don't end up with a certain interpretation we're confident about. We end up with something else, right? The more we look, the less we really know.
And that connects with, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'll come back.
With impotence, I think that's a theme here too. Another old men problem, but these, I mean, because it's not only that he doesn't understand anything, he can't protect. Remember, Roscoe says to him, Sheriff Roscoe, he's like, "Sorry, we couldn't help your boy." And you can tell in the book too, he's really proud of how he's the protector of the people there, but he can't any longer. And in the face of this, he's powerless. He's overmatched. He can't. Not only can he not take the measure of it. And by the way, that was very explicitly a skeptical thing. But reading Sextus Empiricus, the problem of the metric, the measure. But anyway, he can't take the measure, but he also can't oppose it. He can't rise to fight it, to suppress it, to deal with it. He took care of the kid in Huntsville, but this one, it's escaped him. He's ashamed of that a little bit. I'd be curious to know why you guys think he doesn't want to team up with the DEA, but I feel like that's part of it. He doesn't feel like he's a good cop. He feels like he's been a failure, sort of, anyway.
He lacks confidence. His confidence is shot, and it's partly shot because, again, he's failed to understand the universe in even the most basic way, as we all are as a human species. We're not getting, our physics isn't working right. It makes no sense to us. We can't live with this physics. It's telling us that things are happening at the quantum level that intuitively we can't make any sense of at all. So
Carla Jean ends up dead. They all end up dead.
And that word measure, which you just mentioned to me, also makes me think of the measurement in quantum physics, which if you measure it, then that determines what happens. So my radical suggestion for how we should answer the question of where Shigur is. That, and I don't mean this literally, and I don't think they wanted
Yeah.
us to take it literally, but I think they wanted us to think it. That Shigur is essentially in a superposition state
Yeah, he.
up until the moment when Ed Tom opens
I
the
love
door and
it.
makes the observation, and then the
love it.
observation determines that he's not in the room.
Oh
But
my
up until that
gosh.
point, there's no fact of the matter, which is why we see him before he opens the door. And so what we're seeing, some people have said maybe he was in the
Oh, I
room
love
earlier
it.
and we're seeing that.
Yeah.
No, we're not seeing him earlier. We're seeing him in a possible future, not in the past.
Yeah.
That's a possible future, which then isn't
Yeah.
realized
Isn't it?
when he opens the door.
Damn.
So again, is that really what's going on? No, of course not. But I think the Coens wanted that interpretation to be there. I'm going to say
With the
I
two
think
doors. Yeah.
yeah, the two door, the double slit, and
Yeah.
so on. He is there and he's not there. There's no fact of the matter until Ed Tom opens the door, and
He's shredding
what-
your spider.
what, and the no fact of the matter thing is sort of nice when you think about cinema and I'm going to bring in Berkeley for a second, the famous idealist George Berkeley, right?
Yeah.
To be is to be perceived. That's sort of the essence of idealism as Berkeley understood it. There's a sense in which in a movie that has to be true.
Yeah.
Nothing is true unless it's shown, right?
Yeah.
Nothing is real, nothing is there unless it's determined by the film. And so here we have something which there is no fact of the matter about because it is not determined by anything that's shown in the film.
Yeah.
So there is a real nod here, I think, to, in a very deep way, to the limits of possible human understanding, essentially. There's things that we cannot know because they cannot enter into our experience, and nothing we could experience could possibly determine them or make them true or false. And the Coens have put one of those things, I think,
Love it.
into this crucial moment of the film.
I love it.
I'm glad you
There's
like it. It makes me happy. And I want to tie this, by the way, to an earlier thing, the little scene. I think in a way that the whole idea of the superposition and wave collapses being the waves collapse because of observations on a certain interpretation of quantum physics and so on. I think there's a nice little metaphorical resonance between that and the coin flipping that Shigur does from time to time.
Yeah.
And certainly in the first time we see the coin flip, which is in the scene with the gas station proprietor, he says this very strange thing at the end, right afterwards, after the guy wins, calls it right, and so gets to keep living essentially. He's about to put in his pocket, and Shigur says, "Don't do that. If you mix it with the other coins, it'll just become, it'll stop being special. It'll just become a regular coin," which of course it is. He says,
Right. I love that. I
and
love
the
that, 'cause
look on
you're
his, I know, right? We remember because the look on his, but it's such a bizarre thing.
It's such a bizarre
So
thing.
again, this seems to me a case of two incompatible things being true at the same time, right? Is it an ordinary coin? Yes, absolutely. It's just another coin. Is it a special coin? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just saved this guy's life. It has a meaning. And so what this is in a little symbolic form, it's the question of how human meaning fits into the natural world, which is the question of nihilism in a sense. It's just a coin. It's just another coin. It doesn't mean anything. And as Carla Jean insists at the end, right? It's just a coin. The coin ain't got no say. It's you.
And notice he has to assert to the guy. The guy's confused by all this. He's going to tell him. He's got the truth here. He's going to just. But when he tells him, you're like, it still doesn't make any sense.
No, what kind of sense? And it doesn't make sense again, right? We don't know how to make sense of it because we know that it's true that it's just a coin, and we also know that it's true that it has incredible meaning, and we don't know. This is maybe the question philosophers are still struggling with after all these years, right? How does human meaning and meaningfulness fit into the world that science describes, the natural world? Yeah. So I think that's what that's about.
And again,
And it fits nicely with the rest of this interpretation, I think. So yeah.
Yeah. Nice on the nihilism too. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's just a coin.
Which it is.
Which it is.
And the face he
All
makes
right.
too. It's like,
The face is amazing. I mean, as good as the writing is in that scene, his face just adds. I mean, it doubles the value.
this
of
guy who
that
plays the
moment.
clerk, he did that scene so well too.
Well, that guy's brilliant, man. I
man.
know. If the Coens announced like they were going to make a movie about that guy, I'd be like, oh yeah,
Yes.
I'm there.
He communicates so much emotion in with such few gestures. It's so great.
Is there a problem?
I love how they have Shigur when he basically when it's revealed that the clerk is sort of married into it. He chokes on he's eating like peanuts or whatever. I don't know
Chips
what
or peanuts, maybe. Yeah, it's nuts. That's right. He
chokes.
I think they're
chokes.
cashews.
He does a
They're
spit
cashews.
take. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's brilliant. One more thing I was going to say, we were talking about how this is more of a cinematic observation, or what I read or saw in what maybe the extras is, as you mentioned, the Coens methodologically, they leave little, if anything, to chance, right? But you know what's interesting? I read that they allowed Woody Harrelson to improvise some of his lines.
Oh,
And,
really?
okay,
Really?
yeah.
I believe it.
Apparently, he embodied that character and he started saying things that
This is
weren't in the
perfect.
script. I think I saw Josh Brolin talking. I think my I got to recall where I saw this, but Josh Brolin was recounting this experience, and according to Brolin, he said, because you know he had read the script and he knew the other line, so he was on the shoot that day. Because apparently, Woody Harrelson was only there. They shot all his scenes in just a day or two. It was like he had some other
Wow.
commitments.
Hmm.
But Brolin says he's watching the shoot, and Woody Harrelson starts going off script, and Brolin says in his mind he's thinking, you know, it's not going to. They're going to cut, and they're, you know, this is the Coen brothers, and he said they go cut, and the Coens go, that was brilliant, that was fake, leave it in, fantastic, and he was like, huh? I think that's interesting that they
Yeah.
they
Yeah,
had
different
Woody
directors,
Harrelson, they
different
let
that
him,
way,
let
but
him
yeah,
improvise.
yeah.
It's so unlike them. Their reputation is, you have to do the script exactly as written. You know, if this word is
Makes sense.
repeated 4 times and
Yeah.
you only repeat it 3 times, they'll stop and say, "No, got to do it over, man." So the fact that if that's true, the fact they let him improv is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, let's face it too, that the casting was perfect. I mean,
Oh God, yes,
Carson Wentz
absolutely.
was perfect.
He's fantastic.
And I love when he says, again, just as comic relief when he goes, can you validate my parking?
I know, right? An attempted at humor, I suppose.
What's interesting, we didn't talk about this, and I found this fascinating, is in the book, Moss has Sugar at gunpoint. He could have just pulled the trigger and ended the whole thing. In the book, in that motel room scene, and Peter, you just read the book, you know this as well. I was really surprised to find that he's got a gun and he's giving orders to Sugar. He's like, okay, walk backwards and walk and keep your hands up. And I thought that was another brilliant move that the Coens made, because it was much more exciting the way that they filmed it. But I thought that was fascinating that he actually, in a sense, he he did what no one else, at least,
Yeah, he did
could
definitely,
do.
and he wounded him.
He
I think
wounded him. He had him at gunpoint.
yeah.
But here's what he says, and here's in the book when he meets him. He says, Moss picked up the man's shotgun and threw it onto the bed. He switched on the overhead light and shut the door. Look over here, he said. And this is the only description we get in the whole book. The man turned his head and gazed at Moss. Blue eyes, serene, dark hair. Something about him, faintly exotic, beyond Moss's experience.
Ooh,
That's all we
Beyond
Nice.
Moss's experience, the Numina. Here we have it.
There
The
it
Numina
is.
incarnate. I love it. Wow.
I love it too. That's great.
I was telling Troy, Peter, I didn't tell you this, is that I had to get a new computer. So our final product, it might be a little messy compared to how it usually is, but you know, hey, if one thing we've learned is life is messy. Things
That's right.
Yeah.
Robert, if it's not a mess, it'll do until the mess gets here. So
I love that line too.
that's one of my favorite lines. It's so
I
good.
love that
Yeah.
line.
Totally
Yeah.
buy that as something that guys of that sort would say, you know.
Yeah. It's one thing I like about living in Kentucky is it's maybe not as much as West Texas, but you encounter that kind of banter,
Yeah.
the prattle, the band
Yeah.
of which is just these just way that especially men have of like, I don't know, just batting things around with these clever little repartee. It's very skillful sometimes.
I like when he says, and this is in the movie as well. He goes, "We got another execution here, Sheriff." No, I believe this one's died of natural causes.
Yeah, right.
Natural causes.
How's that? Yeah.
Natural to the line of work he did.
That's right. Yes.
The other thing I don't think we talked about that much is the fact that Moss is an interesting character morally, because the way that he responds when he encounters the guy who's agua, agua.
Yeah.
And he's got like when I watched it this time, I was like, he's kind of cold. He's like, I got
Yeah,
no,
no, he's very cold.
got no agua, and he just walks away.
Yeah, he leaves the door open.
Yeah, leaves.
Ain't no lobos.
No,
Yeah.
he's like last man standing. That's all he's interested in, right? He's got
Yeah.
man standing. And then the fact that he wakes up in the middle of the night
Right.
with pangs of guilt, he can't sleep. And then, I mean, what I would do, I would go, oh man, I feel like shit. And then I go, oh well, like the fact that he actually
I know, right?
What am I going to do? Go back there? Fuck that.
that decision, aside from being
Yeah.
monumentally imprudent, it's just it's
It's hard to
the
believe. I
weird
agree.
thing that
I
he
agree.
would do that to
Yeah.
go all the way back.
He says himself it's stupid as hell.
Yeah,
So,
he's the
you know,
dumber
he
in hell.
knows.
I'm going to do
Dumber
it
in
anyway.
hell. I'm going to
Yeah.
do something dumber in hell.
Yeah.
The other thing is we didn't talk about Troy. Somehow we did not talk about the Jallamore gun theory. And
Oh my God. I didn't
We
even
did
think of it
not.
while I was making preparation.
I mean,
wow.
talk about there's a lot of
Boy,
and
I
also
know.
now we have the captive bolt gun. So,
Well,
I mean,
right,
there's a lot
exactly.
going
I
on.
mean, we sort of, I didn't connect it to the gun theory, but we did talk about
you know, I
kind
did
of
think
why
about
that's
what-
so interesting and what it means. Yeah, the
give-
captive bolt gun. Yeah.
You want to give it a shot, Troy? Because I have a thought on that. Because I thought about that earlier. Actually, we didn't talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't.
Well,
yeah.
it had to do with what Robert had this
Mm-hmm.
developmental interpretation that Moss is becoming more Shigor, as time goes by, because he's entered this world. Well, it all starts when he picks up the gun at the in that guy's cabin. He takes a magazine of bullets out of his pocket, and he takes the automatic pistol. Before he just had his hunting rifle.
Yeah.
Which is an instrument for hunting or sniping, but it's a hunting rifle. But when he picks up the automatic pistol, he's become part of that world.
Oh, nice. That's nice.
Because remember, he's following he's going to follow the other guy, and he's speaking out loud so we can hear him. It's like the other guy's going to be checking his backside. He's going to be looking for anybody following him. And if that guy has an automatic weapon, he better fucking have an automatic weapon.
Right. Yeah.
That's kind of the way I thought about it.
So when he says last man standing, he's the last man standing.
Yeah.
Literally.
Mhm.
Is he thinking that there's money? Why go looking for the
I
last
think he
man
must
standing?
be.
I think
Yeah.
he is,
I
yeah.
think he must be. Yeah.
Well, he's entered something about the hidden spaces. I mean, first of all, that's hidden in the sense that it's away from the road. You have to go through some ranch land to get to that spot, but it's also down. You have to go down. And that's, to me, often like a symbol of like going down into the underworld, into the unconscious, into the dark spaces. And once he's entered that space, remember, he's a Vietnam vet too. Like you could just see him with an M16 coming into a Vietnamese village or something, the way he comes walking in there. And, I thought like now he knows he's in the dark space. He's in the space of automatic weapons and serious violence. And I think he wants to be better armed than he is with just his single action bolt thing.
Yeah. Right.
And in the book, we discover that he has killed before. He's killed in Vietnam. So
Yeah,
I'm really glad I read the book.
me too.
But I wanted to read this one section going back to the theme of determinism throughout the book. He says this, which I think is interesting. He's having a conversation with the hitchhiker, the 15-year-old hitchhiker. She looked around. Can I get some coffee? She said, you can get anything you want. You got money. She looked at him. I guess I ain't sure what the point is. Him. The point is there ain't no point.
Yeah, I remember that.
No, I mean what you said about knowing where you are. Again, here's what he says. He looked at her. After a while, he says, and there's a colon, he says, it's not about knowing where you are. It's about thinking you got there without taking anything with you. Your notions about starting over or anybody's.
Mm-hmm.
You don't start over.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. Every step you take is forever. You can't make it go away. None of it.
Oh, wow. That really deepens the parallel with Shigor too.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, what do you say, guys? Have we analyzed the shit out of this film?
I think we
I'm
have.
sure we could say more, but I think this might be a good time to call it a day.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, for those of you who actually not only listened to part one, but made it all the way through part two, and we should mention that we got a We got some mail from someone in Sweden saying, "Guys, it's been 2 months. I'm re-listening to old episodes. So hopefully, these 2 episodes, one and
We got to
part
help
one
this
and
guy
two,
out. He's got to feed the monkey, man.
got to feed the monkey.
I love that.
Got to help him feed the monkey." Anyway,
Yeah,
hopefully,
keep the emails coming, by the way.
keep them
Yeah,
coming.
yeah.
Keep
Let
those
us know
guys
you're
coming.
listening. We love it.
And thank you so much for hanging in for 2 episodes. Hopefully you enjoyed this 2-parter. I have a feeling that we have some plans for some future 2-parters. We were talking about the serious man,
Serious man, yeah.
guests, and we have some surprises in store in the future podcast episodes. But anyway,
You know what I would like to hear from listeners too is where do we go after we finish the Coens?
It'd be interesting to get some feedback
Oh,
on
yeah.
that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
If people have thoughts, that's right. Because we don't want to stop. We're having too much fun.
we have some ideas, but we let's hear what the listeners have to say.
That'd be nice. I like it.
Okay.
Peter S. Fossil, Troy A. Jollymore. I am Robert Jones. Hey, thanks for keeping it tuned in, hanging in there with No Podcast for Old Men. We'll see you sooner than for 2 months.
Sooner than we should. We'll see you if you don't see us for no. That's not right.
We may be behind the door if you look for us. That's where we'll be hiding in your nightmares. Anyway, all right, folks. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and we'll see you at the next episode.